Good morning. Good morning. Oh, sorry. Here we are trying to be accessible, and I'm starting before our sign language interpreters are up here. Okay. Good morning, and welcome to the 15th Annual Human Rights Conference here at Kean University. I'm Dr. Loretta Farrell, Director of the Human Rights Institute. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya, and I would like to offer a brief physical description for anyone who is blind or low vision. I am a short, plus-size, 60-year-old white woman with short red hair, freckles, and blue eyes, and I am wearing a red sweater and black slacks. Before we get into the meat of the program, I'd like to take care of a couple of housekeeping details. First, if you would turn your cell phones off or mute them, that would be really terrific. I would also like to call your attention to, there will be some slides up that have social media hashtags. You're welcome to take pictures and okay, this is showing my age, to tweet, but I think none of you use Twitter. Whatever social media it is that you all use, you can share this program on that, and if you would use the hashtags that are up here, that would be really terrific. In the front of the auditorium as you came in, there was a QR code that had the program, which is virtual. We'll also be putting the QR code up on the slides behind me, so you can sort of follow along with how we're going. So I am so happy to be able to introduce to you the 18th president of Kean University, Dr. Lamont Repollet, who I first met when he was named the 2018 Hank Kaplowitz Human Rights Educator of the Year by the Human Rights Institute at Kean University at this very conference. Dr. Repollet is both the first Kean graduate and the first black man to serve as president of the university. He began his tenure on July 1st, 2020, after serving as Commissioner of Education under New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. During his time as commissioner, he and his team worked to expand early childhood education, promote a school culture that embraces social and emotional learning, and strengthen STEM opportunities for students. Under his leadership, New Jersey's public schools were ranked #1 in the nation by Education Week. His accomplishments here at Kean are no less. Under Dr. Repollet, Kean has reaffirmed its commitment to equity and inclusion, building new platforms to recruit and retain a diverse faculty, admit and support students who are best positioned to benefit from the education we provide, and strengthen institutional supports for achieving our inclusion goals. He created the Equity in Action Presidential Postdoctoral Fellowship Program to increase the diversity of Kean's faculty and added more than 100 tenure-track positions over the last 2 years. He championed Kean's designation as the first urban research institution in New Jersey, a major step toward our goal of achieving the designation of R2, doctoral university, high research activity in the Carnegie classification of institutions of higher education within the next 5 years, which is an incredibly ambitious goal. His commitment to student success is evident in everything that he does, be it establishing departments and divisions designed to provide support to graduation and through to graduation and beyond, or joining undergraduates as they traveled by bus through the American South, learning about the civil rights movement from those who lived it. And not only did he join us on that trip, but when our students had forgotten to bring coats, thinking that it was going to be incredibly warm, he went into his luggage and pulled out sweaters and sweatshirts and shared them with our students. It's not unusual to see Dr. Rep racing around the campus in his golf cart from event to event, cheering on the entire Kean community. We're so lucky to have him as our leader and to have him with us here this morning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Repollet.
Thank you, Loretta. Thank you, Loretta, for your introduction. But before I begin, so if you're in Carter, you should record this, Jerry. So before I begin, I would like to dedicate my speech today to a phenomenal educator, a teacher at Carter High School, Victor Kokas. He's a disabled American. He's my good friend and my buddy. And I can honestly say my time as the principal at Carteret High School and spending majority of the time with Mr. Victor Kokas, I learned a lot about disability awareness. And he's taught me a lot. And so I'm going to dedicate today and dedicate these remarks to Victor Kokas. Victor, you're not here today. I'm saddened that you're not here, but just know that I love you and I appreciate you. And thank you. I welcome all of you to the 15th Annual Human Rights Institute Conference at Kean University. I give a special welcome to everyone in the disability community joining us today. At Kean, we teach our students to be upstanders, to stand up for their beliefs, for their rights, and for the rights of others. By being here today, you are a part of our community of upstanders. You will leave here equipped to lend your voice to the critical issues of disability rights and remind all whom you encounter that inclusion is not for some, not even for most, but for all. But I'll speak more about that moment in a moment. First, let me tell you about this event. The Annual Human Rights Conference sponsored by the Human Rights Institute of Kean University. We are very proud of what we have accomplished through this conference. Thousands and thousands of people we have reached, and the broad scope of issues we have put in front of people for them to acknowledge, to learn about, and we hope to take action for positive change. We have explored topics such as mental health, voting rights, food insecurity, and the global refugee crisis. We have heard from a WNBA superstar, a celebrity chef, and a South Sudan refugee. We've also heard from many, many people who may not have household names, but who each day are working tirelessly on important human rights issues around the world. Quietly, in a very determined way, they are improving the lives of others each and every day. Many of the attendees in this conference throughout the years have been high school students and the teachers just like yourselves. We could not have asked for a more influential audience, so therefore I salute you and thank you for your commitment to this conference year in and year out. The legacy of the HRI Conference is one of awareness and change. Today we turn our attention to disability justice. The CDC reports 61 million adults in the United States, 1 in 4 adults live with a disability. Yet the large group in our society is often overlooked. Today, you will hear about important equity. You will learn how important equity is to members of the disability community. Equity is one of our core values here at Kean. For us, it means access, opportunity, and support for all. But that means different things to different people. To quote disabled activist Judith Heumann, who we saw in the opening video, part of the problem is that we tend to think that equality is about treating everyone the same, when it's not. It's about fairness. It's about equity of access. In other words, equity means everyone gets what they need. Even within the disability community, the needs vary. So we must be ready to respond to on an individual level with ramps, interpreters, assistive technology, trained staff, and more. Here at Kean, we know equity and academic excellence go hand in hand. So we stand ready with the support that our students need to achieve their educational goals. Today, we will hear from speakers and outstanding human rights activists with powerful personal stories and motivating messages for all of us. They were calling us to open our eyes, to notice our brothers, sisters, neighbors, family, and friends in the disability community, and flip our perspective to see things through their eyes, the way I saw through Mr. Victor Kokas' eyes. We need to ask ourselves, what can I do to advance disability rights at my school, in my community, in my state, or in my nation? I encourage you all to listen closely today and be upstanders here. I am reminded of a quote from former President Barack Obama. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. I look forward to a great conference today, and thank you all for being here and enjoy the day. Steve.
For most of human history, disability has been a diagnosis, something to be cured, fixed, and cut out.
For so many people with disabilities, society has really pushed the notion of disability as deviance, as something that's not beautiful, that can't be beautiful.
1 in 4 adults in America have a condition that qualifies as a disability. So it's common, it's around us every day. 70% of disabilities are not visible.
Has someone ever shared with you about their illness or disability and you can't see the symptoms? And you might think, or actually say to them, you don't look sick. Well, these situations and many others like them often end in disbelief, prejudice, isolation, and loneliness.
Persons with disabilities face higher rates of poverty compared with others. They encounter biases and barriers when accessing basic services.
I think the average person, they see disability as a threat to not being able to do things as people have typically done them. And I think there's truth in that. But the question is it because one has a disability or because society itself has constructed itself in such a way because they haven't seen us?
Disability is part of being human. All of us will experience some form of disability during our lives.
We ask for disability access because when we evolve our institutions to be fully inclusive, we can build a world where all are free.
The real work, the real challenge is overcoming those attitudinal barriers to get people to see me for me, everything I bring to the table, and not just the disability.
There's a shift, I believe, going on in our society where we're looking at race and gender, equality and disability as issues that we need to address. We need to be working with all other movements, and we want all other movements to be inclusive of disabled people.
I think it's relevant whether you have a physical disability, you have a mental health disability, that disabled people have examples where they can see themselves as beautiful, or they can see themselves as whole, because we are whole.
People look at us as the label of our disability. And it is a part of who we are, but it is not who we are.
Thank you, Dr. Repaulette, Dr. Farrell, first for granting me this opportunity and for making the space at Kean University to address disability justice. As a two-time graduate of Kean University and a communication strategist for the Office of University Relations for the last 20 years, it is an honor and a privilege to be here and to be the host for today's event. My name is Millie Gonzalez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I would like to offer a brief physical description. I am a disabled, Hispanic, plus-sized female with long, curly brown hair, wearing black shoes, black pants, and a black lace shirt, and I'm sitting in a manual wheelchair in front of a small podium. I am one of the 1 billion forgotten. It is estimated that there are 1 billion people with disabilities living worldwide. This includes individuals with visible and invisible disabilities: physical, sensory, intellectual, and mental. Let me give you a few examples, and hopefully some of these will be familiar to you. Franklin Roosevelt, 32nd US president, had polio and was a wheelchair user, although for much of his life, or perhaps all of his life, that was hidden from all of us. Billie Eilish, musician, has Tourette's syndrome. Simone Biles, world champion gymnast, has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. Comedian Chris Rock, anxiety. And New Jersey's very own boss, not Dr. Reppolette, the other boss, Bruce Springsteen, battles depression and addiction. But clearly, not all disabled people are celebrities. 1 in 4 people in the US are disabled. And as such, we face significant barriers to realizing our basic human rights in areas that many others take for granted, including employment. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that just last year, in 2021, only 19% of disabled people were employed, compared to 64% of people without disabilities. It's also still legal in various parts of this country to pay disabled people sub-minimum wages. Accessible housing, transportation, education, access to voting, autonomy over our own lives, and adequate health care, including reproductive and sexual health, and simple things like the ability to get weighed during a routine checkup at the doctor's office versus having to go to the vet's office to get weighed, because that's the only place that a scale is available. 1 billion people are more likely to be subjected to violence, incarcerated, and to die than those without disabilities. Despite this sobering reality, we remain invisible in our communities, and we often are treated as disposable. However, we are present in all communities across the globe, and the number of disabled people worldwide is ever increasing. In fact, we are one of the only populations that have an open door policy. Anyone can join at any time, through accident, abuse, violence, or illness. And if you're fortunate enough to live long enough, you too will experience disability. I don't say that as a scare tactic, nor should you worry that disability will inevitably become a part of each of your lives at some point, if it isn't already. Why? Because disability is not a death sentence nor something to fear. It's an identity, like any other, with beautiful nuances and a rich culture of its own. With that in mind, disability justice, our topic for today, serves all of us and requires us to work collectively and collaboratively to see it through. But what is disability justice? In 2005, queer disabled activists of color, Patty Byrne and Mia Mingus, and later expanded upon by the now late Stacey Park Milburn, Leroy Moore, and others, launched the framework and 10 principles of disability justice. According to sinsinvalid.org, this includes the understanding that all bodies are unique and essential. They have strengths and needs that must be met. All bodies are confined by ability, race, gender, sexuality, class, nation state, religion, and more, and we cannot separate them. We are powerful, not despite the complexities of our bodies, but because of them. Disability justice aims to dismantle the systemic barriers that the most historically marginalized groups, such as women, people of color, immigrants, and members of the LGBTQ+ community, face. As we prepare to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities tomorrow, I am thinking today of the disability rights movement rallying cry, "Nothing about us without us." It demands that every discussion about people with disabilities, every policy committee, every organization, include the voice of a disabled person. Today, at the Human Rights Institute Conference at Kean University, we are doing just that. We will hear the voices and experiences of just a few of the 1 billion forgotten as a means to achieve meaningful, sustainable change. But that change includes you, our allies and our partners, as we share the road towards inclusion, access, and equity for all. Welcome to the conference. It is my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker for today. Isabel Mavrides Calderon is a Latina disability rights activist and organizer who focuses her work on campaigning for policy change, anti-ableism, and accessibility, with a key focus on advocating for intersectional disability justice. She has hosted campaigns for disability rights bills with the American Civil Liberties Union, the Center for Disability Rights, and Gen Z for Change. She was also an accessibility consultant for protests such as the Australian climate strike and the head organizer of the CVS versus DOE protests, which successfully led to the takedown of the case which threatened to gut Section 504. Like many other Gen Z activists, Isabel uses TikTok and Instagram to educate others on disability rights, disability history, her personal experiences, and much more. Teen Vogue recently featured Isabel in an article entitled 11 Disability Rights Activists on Where the Fight for Justice Stands, where she shared her thoughts around the COVID-19 pandemic and the grave impact it has had on disabled people. Isabel is a senior at Horace Mann School in New York, where she is the president of both the speech team and the Latinx Advocacy Cup. Welcome, Isabel.
My name is Ryan Easterly. I am a black man with a teal and white striped shirt wearing glasses. I identify personally as a black, gay person with disability who's a former foster kid. I have spent the majority of my life with the Americans with Disabilities Act in existence, but you can't necessarily legislate overcoming societal barriers, overcoming attitudinal barriers. The real work, the real challenge is overcoming those attitudinal barriers to get people to see me for me, everything I bring to the table, and not just the disability.
Where are you in your journey to inclusion? For more information, go to disabilityphilanthropy.org and promote using the hashtag #DisabilityInclusion. Brought to you by the President's Council on Disability Inclusion in Philanthropy.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to provide a brief physical description. I'm a teenage Latina girl with brown hair, and I'm 5'1" and currently sitting down. I truly believe that activism is best illustrated through stories, so I'd like to start with a story. December 2020. In Alabama, a young woman goes to the ER with severe COVID-19 symptoms. Doctors determined that she needs to be placed on a ventilator, but she isn't. The protocol used to arrive at this decision lists several health conditions which doctors should not provide mechanical ventilator support for. Except, before COVID-19, this woman was healthy, but not for Alabama's hospital protocols. For them, the fact that she had Down syndrome meant that her life was worth less than yours. Did you know that in 23 states during this pandemic, it was legal to deny disabled people ventilators simply for being disabled, even if they didn't have any higher chance of dying from the pandemic? I just turned 18. Born in 2004, 14 years after disabled people crawled the steps of the Capitol, protested, blocked streets, and occupied federal buildings for over a month to pass a federal law protecting disability rights, called the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. So as a disability rights activist today, I'm often asked, what is there left to do? I mean, we have a law protecting our rights. What more could I be asking for? What you may not know is that according to CDC data, 1 in 4 people are disabled, making disabled people the largest growing minority group in the nation. While certain disabilities disproportionately impact certain racial or ethnic minority groups, disability itself is an equal opportunity offender. Anyone can become disabled at any time. And disabled people are denied what we should all consider basic constitutional protections. Did you know that disabled people can be paid below minimum wage? Did you know that disabled people who are on Social Security income can't get married without losing their benefits? Did you know that disabled people are more than twice as likely to live in poverty and even more likely to be unemployed? And after watching, and still watching, disabled lives be devalued and dehumanized during this pandemic, the ADA simply isn't enough. So you may be thinking what once went through my head. Isabel, what about the Constitution? As a young activist growing up, I saw the Constitution as the ultimate place with human rights protections. So naturally, that's the first place I turned to find out what rights I had as a disabled person. But I soon realized that the Constitution never explicitly protects disabled people. Now you might be thinking, Isabel, did you take 8th grade social studies? What about the 14th Amendment? Ratified by the states in 1868, the 14th Amendment contains the first equality guarantee in the history of the Constitution. It mandates states to provide equal protection under the law. While the 14th Amendment has adequately protected other minorities in cases, its record as applied to protecting the rights to disabled people is nothing short of abysmal. One case in particular caught my mind. In the 1927 case of Buck v. Bell, the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment permitted the forced sterilization of a woman who, like her mother, was believed to have an intellectual disability. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes ruled in his majority decision, and I quote, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for their crime, or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." To this day, the Buck v. Bell decision has never been overturned. When I realized that the ADA is filled with loopholes, the Constitution doesn't do enough to protect us, and the courts have historically led to a further dehumanization and rights being stripped away from us, I realized that there was no legal superwoman coming to save me or my community. I needed to do the work to protect myself and my community. And if I'm being honest, for me, activism is a little selfish. I've realized that engaging in disability justice activism is the ultimate act of self-love and self-preservation, because at its core, it's a movement that validates my life and our self-worth when laws and policies won't. So, now that I realize that those laws won't protect me, I realized that I needed to do the work to protect my community. So I started at the community that I know best, the classroom. I'm a student myself, currently a senior in high school, missing school, but for a good reason. But that wasn't always the case. When I was 11 years old, I was doing gymnastics and I had a spinal cord injury, and I was later diagnosed with a genetic condition. I ended up having a spinal surgery every year of high school. My freshman year, circa 2019, I needed to be admitted to the hospital to have treatment. We asked my school if I could Zoom or Skype into class, and they said no. The technology just doesn't exist. Additionally, they said that the maximum amount of school that I could miss without having to repeat my freshman year was 1 month. I needed to be admitted for 3. When I realized that I would probably have to drop out of school, I was so angry at my body. But then, something happened. The global pandemic. My school went remote, and the accommodation that I had asked for 1 month before and was told was impossible was suddenly being used across the nation. because non-disabled students needed it too. So I got my treatment, went to school from the hospital, and didn't miss a day. I had been part of the disability rights movement for a bit, but I was so focused on campaigns to cure disabilities and nonprofits run by non-disabled people. But in that moment, doing the things I loved while disabled with no problem, I realized that my body wasn't holding me back. Lack of accommodations and accessibility was. That was the moment I decided to dedicate myself to true activism. Activism that doesn't seek to fix disabled bodies, but instead aims to fix society. By internalizing that I deserved education, no matter what my body did, I was able to recognize that other disabled students deserve that too. So, when news headlines filled about learning loss for traditional students not having access to school, I realized that my community wasn't included. There was no talk of the learning loss disabled students faced before the pandemic and how that had evolved, particularly for physically disabled students. I wanted to have that conversation widespread because I knew I wasn't alone. Physically disabled students had just been handed a key to accessibility, and we were terrified that that was going to be stripped away from us. I had been doing organizing with the ACLU for a while, so I put together a panel with disabled students, parents, and teachers, where they shared their experiences about accessibility during the pandemic and before. I was able to see so many unique experiences that got me out of my bubble of just looking through my own perspective. It really changed the way I view activism. But soon after, New York City, my home, while COVID-19 numbers were still incredibly high, announced that public schools would be returning in person with no remote option for high-risk students. I was terrified. I knew that I needed to double down. And along with other activists, I organized protests, conferences, panels. I went to the news as much as I could to share this message. I testified to the New York City City Council. And in all these spaces, I was the only disabled person, the only student, and the only one being directly impacted by the issue we were debating. But after 18 months, New York City instated remote options in public schools for high-risk students. Our voices had been heard within my state. But I knew that without peer-reviewed articles coming from the perspective of physically disabled students on accessibility and education, widespread change was impossible. Oftentimes, when we're faced with a barrier to change, we lose momentum. We either wait for someone else to do something about it, or give up. But as I watched my community have to choose between risking their lives and getting an education, I couldn't afford to wait. True activism calls us to create the change we need to propel change. And the best part about doing activism in a movement is that could look different for everyone. We all have unique backgrounds and abilities and skill sets. For me, I have the privilege of having an educational background in research. So when I was met with the barrier of lack of peer-reviewed articles from the perspective of physically disabled students, I conducted the research myself. I interviewed physically disabled teenagers from across the country on their experiences with education before the pandemic and how that evolved during the pandemic. I coded their interviews, and I found that, like myself, the majority of physically disabled students in my qualitative study had gained accessibility from the remote world in the pandemic. But my perspective was also expanded. I get humbled a lot. I learned that in my study, the students of color disproportionately didn't have access to legal accommodations like IEPs and 504 plans. Other inequities were also shown for low-income students not having equal access to these accommodations, and particularly students with immigrant parents who often faced language barriers to getting accommodations and even fear of deportation through going through the legal process. It popped my bubble of viewing disability rights within a vacuum, and instead made me look towards disability justice, which is inherently intersectional. It got me thinking about what voices are being represented in academia and ultimately impacting policy. I thought about where I could find a place to represent these voices. And I looked towards Twitter. Before Elon Musk fired the entire accessibility team on Twitter, Twitter was like a safe haven for the disabled community. There were so many people sharing their stories. The disabled community isn't a monolith. My experiences aren't the same as others, and Twitter showed that. So with the help of USC professor Dr. Kim, I conducted a research study analyzing tweets from physically disabled students. The tweets showed that there was barriers unique to the non-pandemic world before that weren't faced during our pandemic remote world. For example, there were students who would be late to class because no one plowed the snow off a ramp. That wouldn't exist in the pandemic world. But once again, I was humbled and my perspective was expanded when I found that there was unique barriers to this remote world for physically disabled students. For example, deaf students often didn't have captions turned on in Zoom because their teachers neglected to do so. My perspective was expanded because of this social media world, because it showed this wide diversity in our community. And I realized that when a revolution isn't televised, particularly like the disability rights movement that rarely gets any media attention, social media is where the people have power. That's why, during the pandemic, like so many other teenagers, I joined TikTok. Every speaking engagement I had lined up, every conference, every protest, every lecture had just been canceled. But my community was dying at a higher rate, and I still had a message to share, and it couldn't wait. So I condensed my message to 60 seconds and posted it on TikTok. Soon, some of my videos started going viral, but they were reaching a much more diverse community I was used to. Most of the time when I'm speaking at conferences like this, it tends to be a self-selecting audience of either people who already care about disability rights or know someone who does. But on TikTok, I was at the disposal of whatever For You page I ended up on. And that was scary. For so many people, my videos were the first time they were hearing about pivotal moments in disability history, like the ugly laws and the 504 sit-ins, and the first time they were hearing about the state of disability rights today. I took that responsibility very seriously. I also learned that social media was like the ultimate organizing tool. For so many disabled people, actually physically protesting isn't accessible, especially when there's a global pandemic and so many of us are high risk. Through TikTok, I was able to reach a wide audience and tell them to sign a petition or call their senators to sign XYZ bill. And it really showed me how to make my activism more accessible. I also realized that one of the biggest challenges we face as young activists is feeling the weight of the world. We're being introduced with all these major issues around the world, and it can be so easy to feel alone in it. But social media showed me that I wasn't alone. There's a whole community fighting. That's why when people ask me where to start with activism, I know it sounds silly, but social media is a great place to see people's lived experiences. And without seeing people's lived experiences, we can't advocate for them. So in my many years of activism, I've learned that I don't need a legal superwoman to conduct a research or change the laws for me. I have the power and agency to do that myself. As a disabled person, I often don't have power and agency over my own body. But the perspective becoming disabled has given me has taught me to step into the power that I do have, and we all have, to enact change. And you can too. Do it for the 650 disabled people in the last 5 years murdered by their caregivers, whose murderers are viewed as merciful. Do it for the 90% of disabled children worldwide who don't have access to education, or the 78% of disabled adults worldwide who don't have jobs. Or do it for the fact that in the United States, disabled people still don't have marriage equality or pay equality, or do it for yourself. Because 1 in 4 people are disabled. And statistically, there is a very high chance you will become disabled before you die. It's a good insurance policy. But most of all, do it not because you fear injustice, but because you are empowered of how great the world could be. Thank you.
Isabel is not leaving us just yet. This is Millie. I would like to open it up for some questions from the audience. We have microphone runners available, so if anyone can raise their hand or otherwise let us know that you'd like to ask a question, we can go ahead and come to you. We have a question right in the middle here.
First off, I like to say amazing speech. That was amazing. And one question for you. When you were conducting your research, did you experience any hardships or problem due to your disability or other factors for that matter?
Absolutely. When I was conducting my research, I was a junior in high school. I had just had emergency spinal surgery, and I had put myself in a very strict schedule of how many interviews I would conduct per week to get this research done, try to get this research published. And then randomly I had emergency spinal surgery on Thanksgiving, and it totally threw off my schedule. And I'm someone who likes to have these things put together. I very much like this productivity, and this kind of totally threw me off. And it made me learn that it's okay to kind of have to push things back. It's okay to make your schedule go longer. So it was definitely a struggle, but I think having that surgery in the middle of this whole process kind of reminded me of why I'm doing this. Having to deal with, once again, the issue of getting accommodations within my school whenever I was in the hospital gave me a reminder of why this research is important. So it kind of propelled me for change. But there was also other struggles. I mean, being a young person in academia working to conduct research is definitely a struggle of trying to gain credibility from other people and trying to gain respect within academia. But I was lucky enough to have other people in academia help me through this process.
Hi, I'm also a disabled high school student, and I just wanted to ask how you balance the exhaustion of advocacy alongside the exhaustion of just existing as a disabled person in an inaccessible world, because I know it's something that I have often struggled with. And there are a lot of things in advocacy that I haven't been able to do because of how draining they can be.
Yeah, that really speaks to my experience. I think I'm still dealing with a lot of internalized ableism within myself, where I feel guilty if I can't go to a protest because I'm in pain, or I feel guilty that I can't do these things because I have a lot of homework to do, or I'm applying to college and all these things. But I think a lot of times of living in this late stage capitalism world, we so often tie our worth to productivity, and I think that this disproportionately hurts disabled people because oftentimes because the world is inaccessible, our labor isn't valued, and it kind of creates this cycle of disabled people being devalued and their work being devalued, and therefore internalizing that stigma and lack of self-worth ourselves. So for me, I think it's been a process of learning when to take a break, learning that I can't go to everything, and learning that I can't feel the weight of my world on myself. I think, once again, like I said, seeing that there's a whole community there also doing the work is really useful, because we really aren't alone in this fight. And I wish I could give you a better answer, but I'm still learning to manage that. I still get myself into chronic illness flare-ups when I shouldn't. But it's a process, and I'm honestly still learning.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Isabel. I was really moved by your speech, and I think you're a phenomenal young woman, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. Undoubtedly, you've experienced, with your presence on social media, a lot of hate and pushback, I'm sure. How has that affected your morale, and how has that either motivated or demotivated you in your pursuits for disability justice?
Yeah, thank you. So I've definitely faced that. I actually, pretty recently, I posted a video on TikTok that went more viral than anything. And on Twitter, there was over 20,000 tweets about how ugly I am. On Instagram, my comments were really intense. I even had people start texting me. I had people messaging my parents. It went really sideways. And a lot of these people were I realized people who were fascists, literal fascists. And it was very terrifying for me as a young person. And I think that experience, it kind of taught me that it's something that comes with it. It kind of gave me this introduction to this world very quickly, because this happens very fast. But I've learned that the most important thing is knowing your moral center and knowing that what you're doing is right. Because for me, I honestly will never be offended by a comment that tells me, you are wrong because disabled people don't deserve this, or you are a horrible person because you support abortion. Because I know that these are my morals and these are the things that I care about. So if I'm offended by someone not aligning with that, then I'm not being true to myself. So I think the biggest reminder has been staying center, saying that I know what I care about, I'm saying what I care about, and if someone else doesn't agree with that, this is just part of the world. But it's definitely hard. It's definitely affected my self-confidence, and I'm so lucky that I have an incredibly supportive family that is there to help me, that is there to help me block the trolls. But yeah.
Hi, I'm also a disabled high school student, and I wanted to ask about your research. I'm over here, sorry.
Sorry, thank you.
I know that just as much as I saw furthered accessibility with remote learning, a lot of disabled people, including myself, struggled with the more distant education. So I was wondering if this was reflected in your research and if you were able to get any takeaways about creating this balance between remote learning to keep people physically safe and hands-on instruction to keep people learning.
Absolutely. I think that was part of my humbling when I realized that for me, this remote world was the most accessible thing, but realizing that every disabled student has different needs. And I think that my research did reflect that, but I do have to say that my research was very much specific to physically disabled students, and I think that if my research would have included neurodivergency, then I would have had completely different results. So I did want to stick my study to just physically disabilities, but I do think that like in this wide disabled community, it's going to impact people differently. So while my research really didn't aim to represent that community, it was really more specified, it did definitely show that. And it's something that I am learning how to create this balance, because it does exist, and we can't just fit the needs of one community while ignoring the other part of our community.
On this side?
Hello, my name is Tiffany. I am currently a Black person wearing a black coat and black pants. I really do appreciate your speech. I'm coming from a background trying to bridge that gap in helping students with disabilities, whether speech, language processing. But I wanted to go into your school system with your peers and how they feel about you, advocating for yourself, but for your community, and what has your school done since that time of them accommodating you to be in school?
I think my school has learned along with me. I might scare my school a little bit. One thing I've learned is while fighting for accommodations, you might not be the person who's most favored in the room, but that's okay. It's kind of okay to scare people in order to get accommodations. Sometimes that's okay. My school has definitely improved their process. I actually conducted my study alongside the help of the head of my school, who got me a lot of help with publishing this research study. So I think my school has learned along the way. But I do think that along with so many other schools, it's still not physically accessible. Along my peers, how they view my activism has definitely been interesting. I definitely have had a lot of supportive people, but I've also had a lot of people talk about how oh, she's focusing too much on disability, or oh my God, this is all she talks about. And I think that what people don't realize is when they post on TikTok and stuff about their lives, it's seen as normal, but being disabled is part of our everyday lives. So I think that oftentimes for other people, when they talk about disability, they get uncomfortable. I've also definitely seen that with my peers and with my school. But I think that the more we talk about it, the more it gets normalized. So it's definitely been a learning curve for everyone involved, but I think that right now I see my community more supportive than ever.
Hi, I'm just wondering, what are your social media handles on Instagram and TikTok?
Thank you. So on everything, I'm at Powerfully Isa, ISA. I cannot change the name now, so I'm stuck with it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Isabel, we invite you to stay with us for just a moment longer, but you can make your way to us over here, please. And I'm going to invite Felice up to the stage. Yep, if you could just, right here, it's great, thank you.
Thank you, Millie and Isabel. My name is Felice Vasquez. I'm a senior vice president here at Kean University, special counsel to President Repalet, and I have the sincere privilege of having the Human Rights Institute as part of my division. I can't think of a better job and a more fortunate way to spend your days at work. Isabel, thank you for speaking today to all of us about your advocacy work and your organizing efforts to make change truly happen. As an example for all our young people in this room, today and the larger youth community, Kean University is honored to award you the Young Human Rights Activist Award. Thank you for your work promoting and advocating for disability justice, and thank you for inspiring us today. Joined with me is Commissioner of the Union County Board of Commissioners, Mr. Al Mirabella, who also serves on our Wenjo Kean Board of Directors, to present this award to you, Isabel.
Thank you so much.
A very big congratulations to Isabel for a very well-deserved award. I would like to now invite you all to take a break. In disability community, in all communities, it is really important to practice self-care, so we are going to allow you to do that, whatever that means for you. Please be back in 15 minutes for the next portion of our program, and we will call you in if you're still out in the hallway, but we'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Oh, I'm still on.
When so much is taken, what remains? With so much gone, what continues? When strength vanishes and body fails, what part persists? Perhaps it's the deepest part, the part that believes.
Yes, it is.
Believe means to me that I can basically do anything that I want to do if I put my mind to it and work hard at it.
From the time he stepped on a football field in Avenel, New Jersey, in Pee-wees, Eric LeGrand made people believe. At Colonia High School, he grew into a two-way player, four-year starter, and full-time force. His senior year, he had 115 tackles and scored 12 touchdowns. It was then LeGrand developed a ritual, one he shared in the summer of 2010, a ritual involving a word that would become his second signature.
I used to always hit the EL because Eric LeGrand, for the initials for and believe, used to always tap that.
A second-team All-State linebacker, LeGrand chose to stay home and play for Rutgers. With his size and strength, coaches moved him to nose guard. In 2008, his freshman year, he played immediately.
Hodges can't get away from Eric LeGrand, who drags him down at the 20-yard line. Then a sack for LeGrand.
The staff also saw another role.
I played special teams all year, kickoff and kickoff return, where I basically found my home at.
He was on our kickoff team. He was our leading player on our kickoff team. So that tells you a little bit about a 275-pound man who's your go-to guy on your kickoff team.
We're here at the Meadowlands, the new Giant Stadium. We're out here ready to go, being focused. We're going to keep on chopping all day long.
Eric LeGrand, 6'2", 275-pound junior from Avenel, New Jersey.
The weather was perfect for football. There was 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. We're running down on the field and going down there to make a tackle in a big game, just like I've done hundreds of times before.
Oh, what a great open field hit by Eric LeGrand, who was shaken up on the play.
It felt like a flash grenade went off. Everything went silent in slow motion for a minute, and then all of a sudden I was on the ground. And I tried to get up and I couldn't move. And I was sitting there like, what's going on? I can't breathe right now. And then I just blacked out. And they explained the whole thing. You fractured your C3, C4 vertebrae, and you were paralyzed. I told me I'll never be able to come off the ventilator, never be able to eat solid foods, never be able to walk again. They told me I'll never be able to live a normal life. I believe if we put the funding to it, you'll get these people, including me, out of these wheelchairs, and that's what I'm going to continue to do, to raise awareness and try to raise money through Team LeGrand of the Chris Grandin Reed Foundation, so I can live my dream and go back to MetLife Stadium, getting back up and walking, running, or whatever I can off that field.
We talked to Eric LeGrand, former Rutgers player who unfortunately was paralyzed in 2010 trying to make a tackle in a game against Army. What have doctors told you about your ability or your efforts to try to walk again?
You know, things have come back for me. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm still working hard to get there. That's trying to get back on my feet, you know, leave everything else in God's hands.
That day can't come soon enough.
Eric LeGrand is on a mission to create a new life for himself. Faced with obstacles most would deem insurmountable, his notion of winning and losing has truly taken on a different meaning.
Push. Come on.
But where others might see despair, he sees hope.
I really believe that this happened for a reason. I'm supposed to do great things with this situation.
Inspiring others everywhere and fighting for a future he can see just over the horizon.
And when I'm done with my time, it's over to inspire everybody. I believe I will walk again. And when I do rise from this chair, I'm gonna go back onto the field right where I got hurt. I'm gonna lay right back in that position and get up and walk off that field and say, I finished that play.
This is Millie. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our next speaker, born and raised right here in New Jersey, as we've seen in the video today. Eric LeGrand is an author, a motivational speaker, and a sports analyst for ESPN, Sirius, the Big Ten Network, and Rutgers Radio. 12 years ago, as we learned in October 2010, this Rutgers University football star sustained a spinal cord injury at his C3 and C4 vertebrae during a fourth quarter play at MetLife Stadium. His initial prognosis was grim, but Eric shattered all expectations for his recovery and rehabilitation, and he hasn't stopped since. He's amplified the voices of the paralysis community to mobilize support for critical initiatives, policies, and cutting-edge research. In fact, I've had the pleasure to see Eric at disability events and advocacy on the Capitol Hill, so I can attest to his work in that area. Eric has harnessed the national spotlight he attracted from his injury to give back to the community and inspire those living with and impacted by paralysis to believe. He later launched Team LeGrand in September 2013 as a fundraising arm for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation and has raised more than $2 million for that nonprofit. For his work, Eric has earned recognitions from Sports Illustrated, the ESPY Awards, and the WWE Hall of Fame. He also realized his NFL dream when his college coach and then Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Greg Schiano signed him to a professional contract in 2012. He graduated Rutgers in 2014. Join me in welcoming Eric LeGrand.
Thank you for that introduction, Millie, and thank you guys for having me today. I truly appreciate the opportunity to invite me back to Kean University to share my story about why I live my life the way I do, the newfound appreciation of my life that I have, and how I just go about each and every day trying to be the best that I could possibly be and trying to make an impact on every individual's life that I come across. A lot of times people think that my story started on October 16th, 2010 when my injury happened to me, but I always say that there was an Eric LeGrand for 20 years before that as well, and I want to talk about some of the core values that I learned in my life that was instilled in me at a young age that still go by till today. You know, I love to always go back to the story when I was 10 years old. I had the same routine every single day. I would go home, go to school, come home, do my homework, then run to the park to play with my friends. After I would get out the park with them, my mom would come pick me up from the park to go to football practice in the fall. That was my routine every single day. Well, one day I was feeling myself a little bit, and I said, I'm going to go to school, do my homework, and I'm going to go to the park, and I'm not going to go to practice. I'm going to just show up for the game on Saturday. I remember my mom got out of work. She came and picked me up at the park that day, and I yelled to her in front of my friends. I'm like, I'm not going to practice today, Ma. I'll show up for the game on Saturday. Didn't go over too well for me. She came into the park and embarrassed me in front of all my friends, threw me in a car and said, I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're the best player on the team, you think you're not going to show up? I don't care how good the team is doing or how bad the team is doing. When you commit to something, you see it through. And here I am 20 plus years later, I still remember that lesson of commitment, guys. When you commit to something, when you're working hard for something, you see it through. You learn how to handle success. You learn how to pick yourself up after failure. You learn how to come together and work together as a team. That's what it's all about. When you commit to something, guys, you see it through, because that's how you truly grow. When I got to high school, we had a tradition at Colonia where going into your sophomore year, the seniors would pick a water boy of the team who had to be the sophomore. And I had just received a scholarship as a freshman to go to play at Rutgers University, but those seniors did not care about that at all. So guess who they picked to be the water boy my sophomore year? Me. But this was old school style where you would have to get a hose and you have to go down into a little sewer hole, hook up the hose to the spigot, climb back up, put it up to one of those caution signs with the PVC pipes, and then when practice was over, I had to sit in the hole and wait till everybody was done drinking water and then lock up and bring it down. But you know what that taught me? Humility and responsibility. I was the best player on that team too, but guess what? I wasn't better than anybody else. I was treated the same way, and I still had my role that I had to fulfill for that year. Did I like it? Did I enjoy it? No, but it was something that I had to do for the team. I get to college, and I ended up playing 5 different positions my freshman year, and I thought I was going to be on one straight path, play one position, go to the NFL, and that was it. Well, that was not what my journey started with there, and I thought I lost the love of the game of football. I had a meeting with my head coach at the end of the season. I said, Coach, you put me in this position, that position, that position. That wasn't the plan. I thought I was coming here to play one position, and that was it. And he looked at me, he said, Eric, do you think I would have put you in any of those positions if I didn't think that you could get the job done? The team needed a role to be fulfilled, and I felt that you could fill each one of those roles and learn the position that fast while we're right in the middle of this season. And you're going to learn sometimes. Not everything is going to be straight, a pathway. There's going to be ups and downs, hiccups here and there. But you're going to learn in life that love is sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice for the betterment of the team, for the people around you, your family, your friends. And if you truly love it, then you will stay the path and stay the course. And from there, I was like, you know what? You're right, Coach. And he was right, because after that, I started to go back to my old position that I had first moved to it when I first got there and grew right into it. October 16, 2010, as you just saw in that video, playing at MetLife Stadium, not too far from here. Just tied the game up 17-17 in the fourth quarter, running down the field to make a tackle like I've done 100 times before. That game, I was facing a double team, which means 2 guys came to block me right away, but I was able to get right through them. So I had a good 30, 40-yard head start on the player who I was going to make a tackle on, named Malcolm Brown. As I'm running down the field to make the tackle, I said, do I want to use my head or do I want to use my shoulder on this play? I said, you know what, I'm going to use my shoulder because it's going to be a big collision. I already knew what I was getting set up for. I don't know if you saw in the video, but my teammate actually got down there a half a second before I did, and he dove at his legs. When he dove at Malcolm's legs, he got tripped up in the air, and his body twirled in the air, and I put my head down thinking it wasn't going to be in a tackle at all. And every football player knows if you're going to tackle with your head, you see what you hit, you keep it up. I thought it wasn't going to be in it at all, but when the trajectory changed of his body after he got tripped, the crown of my head went right into the back of Malcolm Brown's shoulder blade, and I fractured my C3, C4 vertebrae, and he fractured his collarbone on the play. As elastic I felt when I hit the ground, my body went stiff. I remember my heels slowly going down and touching the turf, and that was the last thing I felt. My trainers came running out to me, and they said, Eric, is it your head or your neck? And I said, I can't breathe. They go, can you feel this? Can you feel that? And I said, I can't breathe. From there, my head coach, Greg Schiano, comes out and he looks down at me. He goes, E, you have to pray right now. And honestly, guys, when he said that to me, I'm like, I can't move, I can't breathe, and now my coach is telling me I have to pray. I thought my life was over. I remember I was praying for a gasp of air, anything to happen, but at one point, I did close my eyes and I said, God, take me at ease. This is it. From there, I remember when I got up, I remember opening up my eyes again that nothing had happened, and I was just, still frantic and panicking, but they had put a board under me at the time because they brought the cart out, and they did that 1, 2, 3 lift off the ground to put me onto the cart, and somehow I caught a gasp of air for a second, so I said, okay, maybe I just knocked the wind out of myself. I've had this feeling before. I know what it's like, I'm gonna be okay. Let me give a thumbs up to the crowd to let everyone know. As I went to get carted off the field to give that thumbs up, I wasn't able to move my hand. It just felt like the weight of the world was laying on it. And I got a little bit more nervous then. I saw my mom in the end zone. I had my entire family there, my friends, the local pizzeria guy. Everybody was at this game that I got tickets for at MetLife. And I remember my mom and my sister came on the field right after that moment. And my mom obviously was terrified at the time, so I was trying to tell her, everything's gonna be okay, I'll be all right. They put me in the ambulance, and I was ignorant to the fact of what an oxygen mask does for you. I'm thinking once they put this oxygen mask on me, I was gonna be able to take that deep inhale and exhale by myself. And I remember I went to inhale with the mask, and I was not able to exhale, and I pretty much padding so much that I blacked out. I don't remember much until I woke up on Wednesday, and this injury happened to me on a Saturday. And people always tend to ask me, how did you feel those first few days? How did you get through those first few moments? And I always try to tell people, I don't remember much because I was so highly medicated from the surgery and everything that was going on. But the people that were around me, obviously my mom, my family, my closest friends, and my teammates, I said I felt for them because obviously they were fully coherent. They knew everything that was going on. And they didn't know where this battle was going to go. I remember the doctor pulled my mom into the room that night and said, your son has fractured the C3, C4 vertebrae. He'll never walk again. He'll be paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life. Never eat solid foods, and we're hoping he's strong enough to make it through the surgery because he'll be on this ventilator also for the rest of his life. So, obviously my mom heard that. She was devastated, but that doctor, after being very blunt, left the room and started to get prepared for the surgery while the other doctor was talking to her, trying to give her all these different percentages of this and that. But at that time, my mom was checked out. I kind of vaguely remember this, and I kind of don't, but the adrenaline must have still been flowing from the game because they let me see my mom before I went into the surgery. And when I saw my mom, I remember I said to her, I'll be back. And when she saw me say that, she goes, okay, for whoever sees him from here on out, you must have a positive attitude when you go into that room. Don't let him see you upset. Don't let him see you crying. If he's fighting already, we need to fight with him as well and know that we have his back. So from there, I remember, fast forward to Wednesday now, when things started to come to, I remember waking up in my room and I was seeing a bunch of jerseys and postcards and helmets from all over the country and around the world, and all these NFL teams that were sending stuff, and the NCAA teams as well. So it was amazing to see all the support. And at the time, I knew that I was hurt, but I didn't know the severity of my injury. So in my head, I was all happy thinking that all these NFL teams are seeing me now. Andy Reid came to see me. He was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles at the time. Tom Coughlin was the head coach of the New York Giants. I thought I was going to be a first-round pick after this injury because everyone started to recognize who I was. Then, obviously, as time went on, I realized what had happened to me and the severity of my injury and that I wasn't going to be playing football anymore. But the positive vibes that were in my room with my friends that were coming in and my family members and even the doctors and the nurses at the time, they told me, fast forward a few months later, they told me, after they left my room, they were all devastated and crying and everything, but I didn't see any of that. Not in the very beginning, I didn't. There was dark times though, guys, when I was in that hospital. There were moments where I would be laying in that hospital bed with tubes coming at me every which way, with a neck brace on, and knowing how I just went from where I was to being in that position. My life was flipped and turned upside down on me in a matter of seconds, and I didn't know what the future held for me. And I remember finally, after 5 days, my mom was not pretty much sleeping at all. Rutgers, they ended up getting her a hotel that was right next to the hospital with my aunt and my sister were staying there as well. And my coach would come and stay with me from about 11 p.m. until about 2 a.m. in the morning every day for 2 weeks, just so my mom could get some rest. And from there, I remember I would just be laying in the hospital bed acting like I was sleeping so he can go home and get some rest because he had to be up at practice at 6 a.m. the next day. When he finally would leave at the end of the night, I call them the terrors of the night that I went through. I remember just laying in that hospital bed with a call bell next to my head, not knowing if I hit this call bell too hard, is it gonna fall down? And I don't have the energy to be able to talk yet. And I was still hooked up to a ventilator, and my voice was very faint, like talking like this. So how am I gonna get in touch with somebody if this tiny call bell that I have on the side of my head falls down? So I remember finally someone coming into my room, it was a nurse, And I'm like, you know what? I just need to feel like I'm more comfortable. All these people keep out coming in, they're looking at me, they do a few tests, and then they leave. You know, kind of like you're like a lab rat or experiment that they're working on. So I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna have a conversation with the nurse that comes in that's charting. And first question I said to her was, why did you become a nurse? What made you want to do this? And she looked at me and she said, Eric, the reason why I became an ICU nurse because I see people come in usually in their worst moments of their life, and I try to make my patients leave with some ray of hope and that everything will be okay. I don't do this job for the paycheck. I do it for my patients. And I heard that, and I was just like, whoa. It was like this big relief went through my body that, you know, someone's actually here because they care. They want to help me out. They want to get me through these moments. And from there, we started to have more of a conversation. Found out that her 2 daughters went to Penn State, so, you know, I had to give her a big boo after that because ain't no Penn State over here. So we started talking. I started to actually feel better. The people that were coming in my room now, I started to talk with them a little bit more and feel comfortable, especially when I was by myself at night. But finally, about 3 weeks into my injury, it was time for me to move on. I thought I was going home, and everyone's like, no, Eric, you got a long road ahead of you. You're going to be transported to Kessler in West Orange, New Jersey, where you'll be for the next, you know, few months or so to start your inpatient rehab. So I said, okay, you know, let's get to, you know, I gotta go back to work now. It's time to grind. But it was November 3rd of 2010 when I woke up that morning, and I knew something wasn't right. It was the day that they were going to transfer me, but in my head, I'm like, I'm still falling asleep on people. I'm exhausted. Like my body's just not up to, you know, actually rigorous therapy right now. But everyone was pumping me up and motivating me. So I said, you know, let's do it. Let's just go with this transfer today. I got over to Kessler, and I'll never forget going through the hallways, and I see and hear all these people whispering, that's the Rutgers football player. No one knew my name, Eric LeGrand. It was always just the Rutgers football player as I was going through the hallway. And I finally get to my room in Kessler. They decided that they wanted to bring everyone down to meet me that day. It was the CEO, the administration team, my nurses, the physical therapist, occupational therapist, the no-lie guys. The last person that comes into my room is this 5'6" Jamaican dude named Humphrey. He's the aide that's gonna be taking care of me. He looks at me in my eyes and tells me he's gonna take care of me, get me dressed, get me up, showered, into the wheelchair, off the therapy, then back in bed and all this. And I look at Humphrey, and then I remember being this big football player. I'm like, look at myself, and I look at my mom, and I said, Ma, you gotta get me out of here. And she goes, stop. I'm like, there ain't no way this man can take care of me. Little did I know that Humphrey was going to train my mom on how to take care of a quadriplegic and all these different methods and techniques and on how to move me and things like that. But at the time, I did judge a book by its cover, and I had no faith that Humphrey would be able to do what he did for those 5 months I was there. That day, that night I should say, that evening, Rutgers was playing down in South Florida on TV, and I got to pick out the uniforms that day. So I still, you know, everyone finally left my room and let me calm down a little bit. I started to get excited because I got to see my teammates on TV tonight. So I remember the game came on, it was on ESPN, I'm watching it, the game's going back and forth all game long. The fourth quarter of the game comes, and I'm laying in my bed, and all of a sudden I start to get real jittery. I'm getting hot, I'm not comfortable, I'm asking the aide that's working that night to pull my shoulders this way, bring them back over this way, put a pillow under my legs, take them out, angle me this way, angle me that way. And everyone's like, Eric, you gotta calm down. I'm like, I just can't get comfortable. I'm hot. You know, when you're laying in bed and you're just hot and uncomfortable, it's exactly what I felt like, but I can't move around myself. I remember we went on to lose on the last 2 plays of the game. I remember they scored a touchdown and we ended up losing. So I said, you know, let me just go to bed. You know, and tomorrow's a new day, and let me look forward to getting started in therapy. Well, I went to bed and I woke up about an hour and a half later, but I wasn't in the bed anymore. I was on a stretcher. I remember opening my eyes and my vision was completely blurred, and I feel somebody hitting me in my face saying, Eric, wake up. But it didn't sound like a human, it sounded kind of like a demon, like, Eric, wake up. And I said, hit me again. And it was my mom. She smacked me right across my face again. And then she ran out to the hallway and to get the nurse and said, he doesn't recognize me. He just let out a growl. He tried to attack me. Obviously, I couldn't move or anything, but I had no idea what was going on. Come to find out, I had 105.5 degree fever and I was 0.5 degrees away from frying my brain and coming brain dead for the rest of my life if they weren't able to figure out what was causing this fever to spike like this. And next thing you know, they're putting ice packs along the side of my body and rushing me out to the hospital in the middle of November when it's freezing outside, and they're trying to cool my body temperature down. My mom has to call down now to my coach in South Florida and tell him what's going on, and they told her they don't know if he's going to make it through the night. So they rushed me to St. Barnabas Hospital. I remember that night my coach and my athletic director came right to the hospital when they landed, but they told me months later that when they got back here early that next morning, they were afraid to turn on their phones because they didn't know what type of news they were going to land to. You know, through the grace of God, I'm still here and still fighting, but they were very nervous when they landed back here that day, and it just had a weird pit in their stomach to turn on their phones to the news that was what was going to happen. When they came over to the hospital, I remember the first two people I saw, I was still completely delirious, was my sister and my athletic director, Tim Pernetti. And I looked at my sister and I was like, "Hey, Nicole, how you doing?" She looks back, she goes, "Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?" And I said, "I feel great. I want some pancakes." And she looks at me, she goes, "Eric, no, you can't eat pancakes. Like, no, you can't have pancakes yet." And I said, "Well, why not? I want to go to IHOP today." And she goes, "Eric, please, you can't eat IHOP. Just relax a little bit." So I said, "Whatever. Let me get up and try to go for a walk. I want to blow off the steam." So I was like, "Nicole, get off my legs. I want to go for a walk." She goes, "Eric, I'm not on you." I'm like, "I can feel you. Get off of my legs." And she goes, "Eric, please just relax." And I remember looking at my athletic director, and he was staring at me with his eyes bulging out of his head like, "What's happening?" And I got so frustrated, guys, I just threw my head back into the pillow and I blacked out. Say another hour goes by. It's about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning now. I wake up and I had an infection that they finally started to get to come down with the antibiotics, and I was on a bunch of fluids and whatnot. So I started to finally come to and feel better. I wasn't delirious anymore. So I look around and I see my mom and my sister are leaning on each other on this couch, knocked out, and I look in front of myself and I see Coach Shiano. He's knocked out with a spilled cup of coffee on the ground. So I'm like, I'm just let it be. I didn't bother anybody. I'm just gonna watch TV's ESPN was on at the time, so I didn't feel like, bothering anybody at 4:30. Let them all get some rest. Story I'm about to tell you guys, though, changed my life forever. As I'm laying in that hospital bed, I start hearing a bunch of commotion and loud noises in the hallway. You see a girl get rushed by on a stretcher. After that, you see the mom and the dads go by, grandparents, and then a bunch of kids, 15, 16, 17 years old. A lot of same age as you guys in here. And all of a sudden, you're just like, I wonder what's happening. Once everyone finally, the noise, calmed down a little bit, and everyone went to the room that they were going to, I can overhear the nurses talking, because I was my room was right outside the nurses station, and you can hear them say that the girl got rushed in because she had a cancerous tumor on her brain. It actually started to bleed out. She was having a brain aneurysm, so they're rushing her in to do emergency surgery. So I was like, wow, that's horrible. You hope the best for what's about to happen. Say a half hour again, 45 minutes goes by, and it starts to get real loud in the hallway, but louder this time. And all of a sudden, you see the family members coming through, and the kids hysterically crying. Everybody just hysterical. So obviously, I'm like, that doesn't look good at all. Finally, everyone passed by my room, and I can overhear the nurses talking again. And unfortunately, the girl, she passed away on the operating table. And I said to myself right then and there, I'm like, you know what? Whatever I need to do, I'm going to do. If I need to work hard, if I need to pray, if I need to relax, take it easy, I'm going to do, because, God forbid, my family would have to leave the hospital like that after seeing that my teammates, my friends, I did not want that situation for them. And, thank God that I was able to be able to get healthy enough to get out of there. But it put a lot of things in perspective for me, because I know that girl probably do anything to be able to take her last breath again, be able to live a long life, and just opened up my eyes to that there's so much more out there than what I knew being in my little bubble at Rutgers. Before my injury, all I knew was football, practice, weight room sessions, study hall, film sessions, class. That was it every day. But there's so much going on out there in life that people are going through on a daily basis that I had no idea about, that I was now being exposed to and open to. And it really gave me a newfound appreciation on everything. Finally, about 5 days after being in the hospital and getting my infection down, they brought me back to Kessler. And by then, my story had been in the media a little bit. It was on TV and the newspaper, radio, so people knew my story. So when I got back to Kessler now, I rolled into the gym on my first day, and everyone was working out, doing their thing. And I remember when I rolled in there, everyone stopped what they were doing, and they turned their head at the doorway, and they started staring at me like I was about to come in there doing backflips or something. They watched me roll all the way back to my room, to where my therapist was in the back corner. And then when I got to the back corner, they would just turn back around and go back to doing what they were doing. So I kind of went into that athlete mindset. I'm like, you know what? All eyes on me. No one say nothing. Just work out and do what you got to do. Don't pay anybody any mind. Finally, after 2 weeks of that awkwardness, someone had the courage to come up to me, and his name was Jermaine. Jermaine was 22 years old at the time. I was 20. We hit it off right away. Someone around my age, someone I can relate with that's going through a similar situation as myself. I'm like, you know what? This is perfect. And when I was at Kessler, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. Rutgers, they took care of me. They bought my flat screen TV up there. They had my Xbox hooked up to the TV, and they even had a satellite dish installed on top of my room. So I had all the cable channels. So, you know, let's just say my room was the hangout room after therapy was over. And Jermaine had his upper body, so he can wheel himself around, and he would come to my room and start playing video games, and I would talk junk to him, tell me, "You're lucky my hands aren't working now," because I would tear you up in Madden and FIFA and Call of Duty. He was horrible at video games too, horrible, but I would just sit there and talk junk, you know, having fun with him. From there, you know, my family started to get to meet him a little bit, my teammates and my friends, and my grandma was cooking food for him on the weekends, some collard greens and whatnot. So he became like part of my family, you know, part of my crew. But as time started to go along, I realized, I'm like, I don't really know much about Jermaine. He knows pretty much everything about me. It's always been about my whole situation and my friends and whatnot, but I didn't really know much about him. So I came to that crossroads of, how do you ask somebody how they got the wheelchair? This was a new experience for me. How do I ask somebody that? So I remember this saying that my coach used to say to us all the time on the football field, and I thought he was crazy when we were out there. It's 120 degrees on the turf, and we just had a 2.5-hour practice, and he's yelling this saying to us, you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. At the time, I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But then, obviously, it must have stuck in my head in life. We do have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because we're going to be put in uncomfortable situations. But being comfortable in them is how we're going to be able to get through them. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask Jermaine in a genuine way. I want to be educated. I want to learn. And I want to know more about him. So I rolled up and I was like, Jermaine, I know you know everything about me, and I'm sorry that it took me this long to ask you, but how did you get in the wheelchair? Were you born that way, or did you have an injury? What happened? And he went on to tell me the craziest story I've ever heard in my life, but it was just that rule. When you guys are going to encounter different people with disabilities or abilities, be genuine, be approachable, make them feel like they can share more whatever they want with you. Some may share more, some may share less. But not being shy or being afraid to look at someone that looks a little bit different than you or moves a little bit different than you, you know, doesn't mean that you should put a shadow on them or stay away from them or try to, you know, turn your face like, oh, I want to run away from that situation. No. You never know where a conversation may lead you or where it could take you. It might help that person or it might help you. You never know. But with Jermaine, he told me that one day he started to walk and he was getting real fatigued in his legs. And a week went by, he said he started to lose control of his bowels and bladder. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor told him that he needs to start taking some medicine to help his bowels and bladder function better. But he also told him that he needs to lose a little bit of weight or start working out more because his legs aren't strong enough to support his body weight. And right there, he should have known that was a red flag, because he was about probably 5'8", 200 plus pounds, but you could support your body weight at that size. He worked at Newark Airport, actually, and he sat down to eat lunch one day, he said about a month later, and he couldn't get back up to throw away his tray. They had to bring in the ambulance and bring him out on a cart to the hospital on a stretcher. He got to the hospital, and they finally did the MRIs and CAT scans on his body, and come to find out, He had a cancerous tumor growing on the lower part of his spinal cord, which was causing the signals from his brain down to his lower extremities not to be able to get down there, which was causing his paralysis and not being able to have function of his bowels and bladder and be able to walk properly. From there, they said that they would have to do surgery, but if they did, they would have to completely sever his spinal cord, which is cut through his spinal cord, and he'll be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. So he, decided to do the regular chemo and radiation to try to shrink this tumor to see if he can get any function back to his lower extremities. We were some days we were about 5 months into our stay at Kessler, and some days Jermaine was in it, and some days he was out of it. But now it was time for me to transition from an inpatient rehab to my home life. I was going back home. At the time, I was moving down to my aunt's house in Jackson, New Jersey, before my house was being rebuilt in Woodbridge. But I was leaving, and I didn't say goodbye to Jermaine because he was in a hospital going through one of his treatments when I was leaving. So I took a 2-week break. I had to get adjusted to my new home life and what that was going to be like, having nurses and aides come in and being able to take care of me. And I remember I came back 2 weeks later, and I went to Kessler, where it has the outpatient. So outpatient rehab is totally different from inpatient, and where it's at, different therapists and whatnot, what's going on. So I go on a Friday, and the first person I see when I rolled in there was Jermaine. He was in a wheelchair clinic getting fitted for his wheelchair. So I rolled over to him. I was like, Jermaine, what's up, man? Like, how you doing? It's been a minute. I didn't get to say goodbye to you. And he looked over at me. He goes, who are you? I'm like, bro, like, we just spent the past 5 months together, but I could tell one eye was looking this way, the other one was looking that way. So things obviously had taken a turn for the worse, and the cancer was spreading. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go do my evaluation for the day, and I'm gonna check back in with him on Monday when I come back up. So he left a little bit before I did, and that's exactly what I did. I came back in on Monday, and I rolled over to the wheelchair clinic, and I said, hey, did Jermaine get fitted for his wheelchair? Everything went well? They said, yeah, we fit him for his wheelchair that day, but unfortunately, Jermaine passed away over the weekend. And I remember saying to myself right then and there, you'll never hear me complain about anything in this world, because I know that Jermaine would love to be able to be here to be able to take care of himself. I met Jermaine's mom twice and his dad one time during our 5-month stay at Kessler. And he was wearing clothes for the same days, 4 days in a row. Put a lot of things in perspective and opened up my eyes to reality that this injury, when it happens to people, it really flips and turns and changes their life. I've been so blessed and fortunate with my support system around me. I will never, ever take them for granted, between my mom, my family, and the millions of people that wish me well each and every day. But not everyone has that. Not everyone has the same platform. We all come from different walks of life, different situations. We're all gonna face some sort of adversity in life, whether we're 5 years old or 65 years old. How we handle that adversity will ultimately define us. And if you have one person there that can help you, do not be afraid to be vulnerable and reach out to them, guide them, or if you can help somebody else, take the time to do it. Because you never know what someone may be dealing with at home. When they come to school, might be the best time of their life, but you never know what's going on at home. So instead of trying to put somebody down in life, uplift them, motivate them, and help them when in need. And if you need help yourself, don't ever be afraid to ask. One of the main reasons why I started a foundation was for people like Jermaine. I had another good friend of mine named Ingrid who had a car accident. She was sitting in the passenger seat. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and the airbag did not deploy. Her head went through the windshield. Instead of staying there like you're supposed to, she was able to finagle her head through it. She opened up her car door to get out, and she turned her head the wrong way. Her neck wasn't stable, and boom, paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of her life. She comes from a unfortunate background where she's in a 2-bedroom household with 8 other people that live there in the inner city of Jersey City, and she's up in one of the highest levels in the building. She would also tell me how for 3 months at a time period, she couldn't get out of her building because the elevator was broken. So she was literally stuck inside the building because the elevator was broken. And you hear stories like that, and it makes you realize, this is my time. I got to use my platform to help people. So in 2012, my mom and I made a decision to partner up with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And a lot of you people that are probably younger in here don't know who Christopher and Dana Reeve is or was. Well, guess what? I didn't know who they were either. And come to find out, I did my research after asking my mom who Christopher Reeve was, and she was in shock that I didn't know, but he was the original Superman in the 70s and 80s in the movies, and he had a paralyzing injury, but him and his wife started a foundation and been put really spinal cord injury and the research on the forefront for people living with paralysis. Well, when he passed away in 2005, I feel like when my injury happened that the torch was passed along to me. And that's why I continue to raise funds and awareness for people with disabilities, people with spinal cord injuries, so that one day we can live Christopher Reeve's dream. And that's a world of empty wheelchairs. And continue to advocate, and continue to push forward, and continue to hope and dream and have faith, because I know it will happen. A lot of people, too, always ask me when my injury happened, Rutgers, they gave you your degree, right? They gave you that degree. I said, I only had 60 credits at the time. I needed to take a whole another 60 credits in order to graduate, so I started taking classes that January via Skype at Kessler, and I was Skyping to a 3-hour lecture hall. Someone would email me over the notes, and I would use this software called Dragon Natural Speaking to speak to the computer. And let me just say, it was a lot easier typing and using your hands to navigate around that computer, but it was something I had to do, and I wanted to continue to fight for that degree that I always said I wanted for my mom. My sister was able to get it done for us when she did it back in the early 2000s, when she graduated from North Carolina at A&T State University, and I said I want to do the same thing. And it wasn't easy, it wasn't always fun, and there was a lot of hard work, but I'm proud to say I think my biggest accomplishment still to this day with everything that I've seen and been a part of was getting that degree in 2014 from Rutgers in labor relations, and being able to put that diploma on the wall from my mom, because it was just a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of effort from so many people to help me get that degree. But if I was able to do it, you guys could be able to accomplish anything that you guys want in this world. And before I wrap up, Norton, I want to tell you a little bit about now my life, what I'm doing now. During the pandemic, I felt like the world was at each other's throats. Everyone was disliking each other, disagreeing on things. I wanted to bring people together, so I'm like, I want to put my brand on something. I want to learn more on people that can affect them in an everyday life. So I started to think about, I have a T-shirt company that people wear T-shirts, but how often do you wear a T-shirt? Like, how can I impact people every day? So I decided, what do people want and what do they need? Coffee. So I ended up having my first cup of coffee in August of 2020, tried it out and really enjoyed it. Hired a business advisor, started learning about the business, how to run a 7-day operation. It's not always easy, it's very hard, it's very stressful, but I'm having a blast doing it. And I opened up LeGrand Coffee House in January 2021 with our online store. And this past May, our brick and mortar opened in my hometown of Woodbridge, New Jersey. And our motto is, we want to bring unity to the community with a daily cup of belief. My place is fully accessible. People can get around. People in wheelchairs like myself, like Aaron Power Chairs, can maneuver around the store without asking people to get up when they go through aisles. And I wanted to make it accessible for all people to come out and just enjoy themselves and feel confident and being happy to get out of the house and just enjoy life and have your daily cups of belief, which has been my motto since the very beginning of my injury. Just have to believe in yourself. You believe in the man above, anything is truly possible. And the definition I'm going to leave you guys with before I open it up for Q&A is the definition of success. And it's the peace of mind you get knowing you did everything you could to be the best you can be. I'll say one more time, the definition of success. The peace of mind you get knowing you did everything you could to be the best you could be. If you look yourself in that mirror at night, you say, you know what? I gave my all on that work project, that school project, or helping my mom out, my sports, whatever it is. I gave it my all. And you should be able to put your head down on that pillow at night and sleep at ease. And if you don't, we're all human. God willing, you wake up that next morning, you look yourself in the mirror, you say, you know what? Today I'm going to make today my best day. And you start adding those days up over and over and over. Watch where your life takes you. Watch the people that will come into life. Watch the opportunities that start to present themselves. It's truly incredible. And I know one day I am going to go back to MetLife Stadium and lay down on that 25-yard line and get up and run or crawl off that field. And it's going to be a big party in New Jersey that day. So thank you guys for the opportunity to share my story. Good job on that. I'm watching you. So I'd love to open it up for some, I guess, Q&A if you guys want to do it.
Your name and image description. Sorry for yelling. Your name and image description before you ask your question, if you're able to, or just raise your hand or somehow let us know that you have a question or comment. We will bring the mics to you. We have one question here in the center.
Hello, my name is Jasmine. I'm currently wearing brown slacks, brown turtleneck, a black trench coat, and my fake Doc Martens. And I have a question for you. Kind of going off our last activist speaker, I know that COVID-19 might have been hard for you being a disabled person, so can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that and getting assimilated to like the new society?
Yeah, with COVID-19, that's a great question, actually. It was very tough for me because a lot of times when someone sees someone that's paralyzed, they think that they just can't move. Well, there's a lot of secondary complications that comes with paralysis as well, and one is lung deficiency, not being able to have full access to my diaphragm that's partially paralyzed. So now having that and worrying about COVID-19 and how that really attacks your lungs, I really isolated myself. Consider myself pretty an extroverted person, being out and about in the public. But when COVID-19 came, I was inside, indoors. The only people I saw were some family members and my nurses and staff that used to come in, and it was a scary time for a while. And my speaking engagement stopped, everything stopped. I started watching, obviously, Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. I think I watched every show on there. That's when I started to, after a while, I got tired of that, and that's when I started to listen to audio books and inspire myself and get myself motivated for what I was going to do next, which led to opening up the coffee shop. But it was definitely tough times.
Hello, I really appreciate your speech. My name is Tiffany Nell. I am black. I'm wearing a black coat with some black slacks. Are you still, I know like based on your football experience, that's something that you have carried over throughout your whole life. Are you interested in coaching for anybody that in your shoes, anybody that's paralyzed or anybody with any type of accessibility or disabilities? Because I know there are programs like the Special Olympics where they're geared to that, but do you have any experience of coaching in that population at all?
I never actually thought about getting into coaching because I always thought when I wanted to coach, I would love to be more hands-on, being able to show, more than I could, tell. But I've actually, when it comes to, helping other people with, just in the disability community or spinal cord injuries, I had a feeling that just I could do a lot with my words, and I've been able to help people that unfortunately get injured, and my mom and I get calls all the time, and we're able to coach up people on how to handle their situation, educate them on spinal cord injuries, show them what is out there, some of the resources that may be to them. So that's kind of the coaching role that I feel like right now, instead of actually being on the field doing stuff, being able to coach people after this life-altering injury.
I guess it's me. How you doing? My name is Lennox Mars Jr. I'm wearing I'm a black male, black slacks, black shirt, white and black plaid jacket. I'm in the field of advocacy as well, and I own an agency as well. But my pressing question for you is, what would be the best resource, one or two resources that you would say that would help you and help the community as well?
The Christopher Dana Reed Foundation, they have a paralysis resource center for people with spinal cord injuries that they have a 24/7 call line where you call in. And if there's ever any need that you need, whether it's education, if it's somebody to talk to, a peer mentor, someone that's going through a similar situation for them, that we highly advocate on that, because at one point the government tried to take that away from the Christopher and Dana Reed Foundation. That's why we were down Billy and I mentioned we've been down to DC before, and on Capitol Hill we were fighting one for that because that was just something that people need, people want all the time, because sometimes you go through those dark times and people have terrible thoughts and they don't know where to look for or where to turn to. That was one huge resource that was a big, I believe, huge in advocacy. And then another resource I would say is, depending on people's situation, it's us people. We have to be the advocates. We have the ones that continue to push and educate and show that just because you look different or just because you move different doesn't mean that you have to be looked at or put in a certain category or a certain way. Yes, obviously there's all types of different disabilities in this world that we all may not know about or educate ourselves, but if we have an open mind and we're willing to learn when we cross that path or have those opportunities, I think it's just the way that we make this world a better place.
Thanks. Hi, Eric. My name is Jerry DeRillo. I'm a teacher and old football coach from Carteret High School.
Battles with Carter.
Yeah, I coached in some of them when you played.
Yeah.
All right, and I just wanted to say, great job, very powerful speaker. What are some of the little things on a daily basis that allies can do to help just spread the word or help, spread awareness on a daily basis with everybody and kind of expand, the goodness, so to speak?
Honestly, it's being in the community, like now, when obviously things that my friends and my family notice, like little things because of my injury, or people that are able-bodied that are parking in the handicap spots, or not all some CC will bump into you on the sidewalk, and there's no curb up there, so you got to find a way to get down on the sidewalk, or bump people, knock into you, not say nothing, just completely ignore you, things like that. So people, my friends, my family, they continue to always advocate. They see somebody in a handicap spot, and that person comes out, God bless them, because they're gonna get an earful from my mom, family, my friends. When there's not accessibility, doors are not wide enough for my wheelchair to get in, we will continue to push that and tell people, hey, you have to make your place fully accessible for all people. Not everyone can open this door, walk in, things of that nature. So continuing to just, be aware of certain situations that are out there where you may not realize that little 5-inch curb right there that someone like myself has a hard time getting down. I'll scrape the whole bottom of my chair up going down there, or that parking spot that somebody took. Now I gotta go find myself around the corner and stuck in the rain, things like that situation. So continue to just be more aware and make people more aware of those situations. I think that's how we can really help in a positive manner.
This is Millie. We have time for one more question. And I'm going to add to what Eric is saying. And I think one of the ways that all individuals can help the disability community to sort of amplify the issues and the concerns that we have is to be our allies in this work. Because we are often not invited to the table to have these discussions. We are often not included. And so recognize when there are not people with disabilities in the room that you need to be asking the tough questions. Have you thought about how your event is accessible? Have you thought about, how a person with a disability would access your supports and services? So again, if people with disabilities are not at the table, first and foremost, invite us to be there. And secondly, if we're not there, recognize that we're not there and ask the tough questions that we would be asking if we were. And any final question? Oh yeah, let's go ahead.
Arlette, and I'm a teacher at Carter High School. I really don't have a question, but I teach English. Yeah. So we do a hero essay, and I used a quote from Christopher Reeve, which I had to look up again. He said, "A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles." So I use that for my students, I'm not gonna get emotional, to write their essay. And when you were talking about him and how, he passed away and the torch is with you, and I've heard about you, but to meet you in person, it makes me really humbled because I talk a lot, as my kids say, but you're putting your beliefs and what you talk about into action. So I'm very humbled and I'm really grateful to be here. And thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you. That's what it's all about. Put your beliefs and your words into action and being able to actually make a difference. And obviously, as you can tell, Christopher Reeve has made a difference in a lot of people's lives, as you just mentioned one of his quotes that is plastered all throughout the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and that is what it's all about, just an ordinary person that's able to handle the obstacles and struggles and battles that we go through in life and be able to make the best out of them. Those are heroes.
Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. I'd like to welcome back to the stage Felice.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
I want to thank you again for coming here to Kean University's Human Rights Conference to share your incredible story, as well as your incredible energy and positivity that will surely serve to motivate all the great young people and educators who have come here to hear your speech. Kean University is honored today to award you our Human Rights Activist of the Year Award for all your work to give back to the community and inspire those who are impacted by paralysis and all people who have the opportunity to meet you and hear your story. Thank you for all your work and for the inspiration you have provided.
Thank you. Do you want to move the microphone? Yeah.
Thanks, Nellie. Commissioner Mirabella from the County Board of Commissioners wanted to join us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. One final round of applause for Eric LeGrand. As we prepare the stage, sorry.
Have you watched someone parking in an accessible spot, but they're not using a wheelchair? Have you wondered if they really have a disability? Has someone ever shared with you about their illness or disability and you can't see the symptoms? And you might think, or actually say to them, you don't look sick. Well, these situations and many others like them often end in disbelief, prejudice, isolation, and loneliness. Wayne and Sherry Cannell founded the Invisible Disabilities Association for these very reasons over 20 years ago. They wanted to provide education, encouragement, and connection to the millions who are touched by illness, pain, and disability around the globe. IDA is treating the deeper roots of problems in society, not just specific diseases, but the perceptions and misconceptions and deep-seated notions of what it means to live daily with an invisible disability or to care for someone who does. Everyone has a story, a friend, a family member, a coworker, maybe even yourself. Here are some of their stories.
I had great plans for my life. I was extremely active, goal-oriented person. I was just always on the go. And none of those plans included being sick. I was also having bouts with paralysis, and they didn't know why. Then at 27 years old, all of a sudden, one side went totally paralyzed. The next thing I know, I was paralyzed from the ribs down. Eventually, after being in the hospital for a week, they diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis.
The world changed. I was in an auto accident, and the accident, I was unconscious, I was injured, and my memory was fading away. I discovered that I had a brain injury as a result of the accident.
Initially, I was interested in invisible disabilities because I believed my music could help others that are struggling with invisible disabilities. And then, about 4 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with a rare heart condition which would be considered an invisible disability.
I was born blind in my left eye, and you can't tell because it's hemi-blindness. People would get angry, people would make fun of me. And you don't think that it gets to you, but then it starts to get to you. I can't even take care of my daily needs. I can barely get a shower or wash my hair. It takes me days to wash my hair and get it combed out.
No one can imagine living alone with a brain injury. You don't know if the dishes are done. You don't know if you're taking a bath. You don't know how to dress. You don't know because you don't remember. If you know me, you see me, you don't think that I have this thing going on in my head that I'm constantly battling.
And the hardest part is, people didn't get it. People would say, but you look fine. What's the problem? People need to see it to believe it. And that is the hardest part. And I was this happy, positive, outgoing, life-loving kid, and then every day being told that I'm fat, that I'm emo, that I'm goth, that I'm ugly, it gets in your head. It really starts to get to you. And I would go to my mirror every day in my room, and slowly this person, this Cassandra Perkins that I loved, just disappeared. And
one of the most insensitive things I think that I got from a principal and also a teacher was that your daughter looks fine. She looks great. And I get it from people on Facebook, to which in my head I'm replying like, yeah, right, you can see that the blood's pooling in her legs and that her heart isn't working correct, right?
Oh, no! One day I realized I have an invisible disability. It's invisible. People can't see it. And I was so excited because it just completely wrapped around the description of what I was going through. I think if we give people a platform and give people a safe place to talk about these things, they're going to be more willing to open up and know that they can make connections.
I have some place to go, some people to talk to. When I'm starting to get frustrated or I had a bad day, I can pick up the phone and call. And that's very important because up until recently, I was by myself.
There's days where people feel really good, there's days where people feel really bad, but they know that they can come to this social media platform and be able to connect through that. And the Invisible Disabilities Association shows people the mountain so that they can see our perseverance and how hard we fight. I feel supported. And I feel like I have an organization that's fighting for me. Here's why I love Invisible Disabilities, because there's so many aspects of the spectrum. There's helping the caregiver, there's helping the person who's going through it, as well as helping people who are just outside family or friends, how to help that person, how to say the right things, what to do.
So what I draw? So what? My clothes don't match. It's my disability. Get over it. I'm here, and I'm not going to go away. I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm here.
Wow, those stories were amazing, and many of you have a story. Maybe it's a story of illness and pain, but really what it is a story of people not believing you. And we want to believe you. We want to understand that just because we can't see the illness or the pain, that doesn't mean it's not real. So at Invisible Disabilities, we believe you. We want to acknowledge the difficulties you're going through because we know you're the expert who's living with the illness and the pain and disability. We want to be your voice. And we want you to join us in that. We want you to join us in sharing those stories, and we want you to be that voice as well along with us. So please go to invisiblenomore.com. That's invisiblenomore.com, because let's together envision a world where people living with illness, pain, and disability will be invisible no more.
A great introduction to our next portion of our program, which is going to be a very dynamic panel discussion. Again, this is Millie speaking, and I have the honor to introduce our panelists for this afternoon. Dr. Nicole Schroeder is one of Kean's inaugural Equity in Action Presidential Postdoctoral Fellows, who teaches disability studies and history. Nicole researches and writes about the history of disability in early America, focusing on disabled individuals who interacted with the state, the welfare system, and the medical industrial complex, with a particular focus on the intersectional relationships between poverty, disability, race, and gender. She received her bachelor's from Colgate University and her master's and doctorate from from the University of Virginia. Welcome. Barbara Goldstein is a retired educator, having taught high school and college mathematics for many years. You can find her sharing some best practices and successful teaching techniques on her Miss G show on YouTube. Barbara is also a fierce self-advocate. Aiden Allman Cooper is a senior here at Kean University. He established his own business to address student issues in the education field through personalized advocacy. Aiden is also the author of This is Autism, an Amazon.com bestseller in multiple categories, and a volunteer in his community. Please welcome our panelists. First, I would like our panelists to be able to briefly introduce yourselves. I ask that, of course, you give your pronouns and physical description as you do so.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Schroeder. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a young white woman with brown hair and rose gold glasses. Today, I am wearing a plaid dress with a white, black, and brown pattern. I received my diagnosis about a decade ago. I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And this is a medical condition that causes me to dislocate all of my joints. It can also lead to other complications, and so I have numerous comorbidities that are tied to that diagnosis. And so a decade ago, when I received my diagnosis, that was the kind of moment in which I shifted into a disabled political identity. And just like Isabel mentioned earlier, I realized that I really had to advocate for myself, to see a new world, to see the world that I belong to. And so for the past decade, I have been researching and writing and publishing about the history of disability in America, and now I am a professor of history and disability studies. Thank you for having me here today.
Hi, my name is Barbara Goldstein, and I am is it off? Oh, I'm sorry. I am a 73-year-old white female with short gray hair, and today I'm wearing a Kelly green shirt and navy blue pants. I was diagnosed in the late 1980s with fibromyalgia, which at that time wasn't even called fibromyalgia. Very little was known about it. And the basic symptom of it is chronic pain. And chronic pain is something that is very difficult to live with, but if you don't make the right decisions about how you're going to live with it, then it's going to severely interfere with your enjoyment of life. So I try to make those right decisions, and my motto is that attitude is everything. I was an educator for, since I was 20, so for 53 years. I taught high school math, and then I taught at a college level, graduate education, and it's very, very rewarding for me to see all the high school and college students here today. Thank you for having me.
Yes, good morning. My name is Aiden Allman Cooper. I am a white male. I am 21 years old, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And I am wearing today a blue suit with a bright blue tie. Since birth, I was diagnosed with, originally it was known as PDD-NOS, but I was diagnosed with autism. With autism, there are a lot of gifts as well as joys associated with that, but there's also some challenges and some things that has caused some difficulty in my life. I also, in addition to autism, I've struggled with some mental health issues, as well as I am also physically disabled. I have ulcerative colitis, as well as eosinophilic esophagitis. And there's a lot of other comorbidities associated with this, but despite some of the challenges that I faced in life, I'm very passionate about making sure that everybody is feeling good about them. In other words, I really want people to know that despite some of the challenges, because believe me, there are people who have a lot of challenges, maybe even more so probably than I do in certain areas. There's still ways of finding out not only who you are, but what you can do to help other people, as well as what you can do to help yourself. And so I'm really thrilled to, be in this space where we can hear what people have to say, what you have to say, and kind of have a conversation about what is disability, what does that mean for people, and how can we move the needle forward to a more inclusive, welcoming, and really friendly society. So I'm really happy to be here with everyone. Thank you.
So prior to the conference, this is Millie speaking. Prior to the conference, we invited the audience to submit questions. So I want to take a few minutes to answer some of them. And again, I just ask each one of you to say your name before you speak so we know who is speaking. So when I roll into the room or when I rolled onto this stage, people know I'm disabled. That's not something that I can hide. But of course, the video just showed us that not all disabilities are visible. And frankly, as a person with a developmental disability, I have spina bifida. My primary physical diagnosis is often the least of my challenges. So for folks with invisible disabilities, I suspect there's a fluidity of disclosure, right? And so one of the questions that was asked is around that. How would you explain identifying as a person with an invisible disability? And I want to take that a little further and ask if you could tell us a little bit about the impact of disability on your daily routines and your experiences around disclosure of your individual disabilities, maybe both personally and professionally, and how and why you came to those decisions. And I'm happy to repeat any of that if necessary. So I invite anyone to begin.
Of course, this is Nicole. So right now, I do not present very visibly with a lot of my symptoms. But when I was an undergraduate in college, I very regularly wore braces. I was in a neck brace for a year as I was kind of pursuing brain surgery. I used a cane until I could secure enough physical therapy. I'm very lucky right now that I kind of have the joint stability I need to be able to navigate the world without those supports. But there are days where I do need them. This is a day where I've chosen not to use them. Right? And that is a choice that I have to make every day, and that's dependent on a number of factors. I might have gone to brush my hair and dislocated my shoulder. Right? I might have grabbed a bag from the car and twisted my ankle. All of these things are things that happen to me on a weekly basis, and it means that it's really complicated to tell someone what happened between today and yesterday. Because for a lot of people, when they experience a sports injury or they get sick, right? They get better after. And there's this constant presumption that you're going to get better. But for people like me, I have a connective tissue disorder. My connective tissue is never going to get better. And so every single time I dislocate, it creates micro tears, which lead to new tears. I damage my joints, I damage my tissue, and that means I dislocate more and more frequently. And so I have to be really proactive and careful and thoughtful about using aids when I need them, but also strengthening my body when I don't. And that is something that is very hard to convey to people. People will ask, well, why did you need a cane yesterday but not today? Are you really disabled? I get that question a lot. I get this assumption that because I do not visually present all the time as what you expect disability to look like, then I'm not that disabled. But you haven't seen me lying in a hospital bed. You haven't seen me healing from surgeries. You haven't seen me sick on the bathroom floor, right? You haven't seen me in all of these situations in which, had you seen them, you would think that is a very, very ill person. And so I just want to push us all today to think about disclosure as something that for some of us we get to mediate, and for others we do not. And the reality is that every time I need to use my cane, every time I need to use a support, I question whether I should do that. Because you don't see a lot of professors with canes, not at my age. And you don't see a lot of disabled professors. I know very, very few other disabled academics who openly identify as disabled. Because to be disabled in the academy is to basically ostracize yourself, right? Disabled people, till now, have not regularly belonged in the academy. Disabled faculty members make up between 1.9 and 3% of the faculty in the United States, despite the fact that 20% of undergraduates are disabled. And so for me, disclosure is a risk of my employment, of my credentials, but it's also a way to legitimize the work that I do, because my embodied experience as a disabled individual tells me where to find disabled people throughout history. It tells me how to search for them in the archives. It tells me how to tell their stories. It tells me how to find them when other people say they're not there, because I am here, and they are there too.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Barbara Goldstein speaking. I have an advantage of having gotten older. Nobody really questions why a 73-year-old woman is walking more slowly or needing to stop to catch her breath. So age in that respect, in terms of disclosure, has kind of acted in my favor. But I would say that if I look back several years, which is also something that becomes more difficult as you get older, I never really was terribly concerned about whether people understood what my disability was, whether they understood fibromyalgia, because very few people did, and very few people still do. What I was really most concerned about was that people respected the choices that I made for myself. That if I said, no, that sounds lovely, a walk through the park, but I'm going to pass on it today, that they didn't turn around to me and say, oh, come on, let's go. And in that respect, I guess my advantage is that I do have a very assertive personality, and I did always advocate for myself. I found that one of the places I had to advocate the most for was in the medical profession, because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in the late 1980s, when it wasn't even called fibromyalgia. And I have found, even to date, that I know more about fibromyalgia and more about what it does to my body than most of the doctors that I go to. And I've very often had to search for a doctor, not who necessarily knew everything about fibromyalgia, but one who would listen to me, and one who would have the respect that I knew my body better than they knew my body. So my message on disclosure is that you always have to be an advocate, that you have to believe that you're entitled to make decisions about yourself, about your limitations, about what you can and can't do, and that nobody has the right to question them. And you just have to be very strong about that. Thank you.
So I think that, oh, I'm sorry, this is Aiden speaking. I think that disclosure is something that really, I believe that almost every person with a disability has had to process and has had to face at one point or another. I want to really just kind of talk a little bit about the whole premise of disclosure in of itself. Firstly, I mean, disclosure is something where the person with a disability has that sense of bravery or the sense of willingness to be open about a personal identity. And unfortunately, in many places, you go to places like Texas and and Ohio, all these different places, you're going to not always have a community. It could even be in New Jersey. It doesn't matter where you go. There's going to be instances in which you feel as though you're not fully able to disclose and be honest. I've had that problem really all my life. I think that the way I present myself, some people say, this is a common thing that I've gotten from a lot of people. It's really essentially been something where it's, Aid, you don't really look all that disabled. You look pretty good, or you don't look typical, or you don't look autistic. I guess there's a look to being autistic apparently, but or you don't look physically ill, or all these different things associated with it. And what I say to that is that, as Dr. Schroeder was saying a little bit before, you haven't seen that person at really that level of being sick, or at that level of that struggle. I've been in the hospital many times. Different procedures. Each month I get an infusion where I'm not really feeling all that great. And I say to the people who really say these things, they might not necessarily be doing it on purpose, where they say, oh, you look, maybe it's a way to comfort, to kind of basically be like, you're okay, you're not disabled, it's not all bad and everything like that. But to me, I really find that invalidating. I find that to be something where, I'm happy that, you find that I'm capable in that instance, but it's almost a sense of this ableist practice where, we're striving to get you to that point where you're capable in these areas, just as a lot of people in the world are. With disclosure, I've been very scared at times of being fully honest about some of the challenges, because I grew up in a school environment where it wasn't okay to disclose. I grew up, in a system where disclosure and being honest of who you are, not just with disability, with sexual orientation, with identity, with all these different things, was really frowned upon. The other thing that I just want to briefly mention about disclosure is that I think it is so brave of people to, and it really shouldn't even be a brave thing. It should just really be a normal, way of life. Hey, I have this, and that's okay and stuff. It shouldn't have to be this big, Zoza of, oh my God, this is so brave, this is so this is so that. But bravery has to naturally come with this, because we're in a society where disclosure and being honest about who you are at times is frowned upon. So when we talk about disclosure, I've had to, hide certain things previously, but as I've evolved as a person, I've been more honest and open, because I want to, develop professionally only for the fact of helping other people. And I think as a result of trying to help other people, you sometimes have to put a little show on to show that you're capable. And it's a whole game that you have to play. I think that from listening to Barbara and Dr. Schroeder talk about these things, as well as the message of this is that it's okay to be who you are, and it's okay to be honest with everything. And I'm going to take away, at least from what I've learned, is it's okay to disclose, and it's okay to also say, hey, listen, I'm not really ready to get into this. That's okay as well. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe somebody a memoir about the things that you struggle with. As long as you're feeling good and you're in a space where you can communicate what you need and what you want to get out of it, I think that's a win for everyone. So that's what I'd say about disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments. This is Millie. And Aiden, you actually kind of gave a great segue to have a conversation about ableism. Talila T.L. Lewis in January 2021 defined ableism as a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people in society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. And you don't have to be disabled to experience ableism. So a couple questions came through about this topic. I'm going to put them both out there and again, hand it over to our panelists. First, can you, in maybe your own words, explain ableism or ableist culture, or perhaps examples in your lives of having experienced ableism and ableist culture? And secondly, what do you feel is the most important step that can be taken to interrupt ableism?
Turn it over to me? Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely. Okay. So with ableism, it's funny that we're actually talking about what that definition is, because I actually happen to be very privileged. Dr. Schroeder is my history professor in 2 classes. One of them is an independent study discussing all about what academic ableism is. And it's a really great conversation and the great work that we're doing, and I'm learning a lot in terms of the academics surrounding it. Look, I think that academic ableism is really the idea in which you are in a system, you're in a society where there is this pressure of being able-bodied and fitting this role or fitting this idea of what does it mean to be a student academically that everybody else can handle. I'm very experienced in seeing academic ableism in the K through 12 setting. And I've mentioned that to Dr. Schroeder about that experience, and I'll briefly talk a little bit about that. You know, with my story, I had mentioned a moment ago, you know, I was in a school system that treated not only myself, but with other people with disabilities with tremendous disrespect. And it was always, how can we establish accommodations or modifications that are going to be easiest to implement? In other words, how are we going to not break our back to help the kid? With academic ableism, I think it's for people who have a unique learning need or a disability or whatever you want to call it, that are being pressured to be in a system. It could be in the higher education system. It can be starting really in preschool, where they are supposed to do everything like everyone else does. You know, the same activities, the same learning, the same programs with it. And that's just not realistic, because everybody is different. There's not, at least as far as I know, unless science is, you know, changing, we are all different. And that's what makes humanity really great and really rich and really beautiful. To put the notion that all children, or all adults, anyone that's really learning can learn the same way, do the same way, is really ableist in practice. Because if you look at it, you know, people learn different ways, and people also, people not only learn different ways, but they also have different unique set of challenges and also unique gifts. So in terms of the idea of academic ableism, it's the practices, both actual as well as kind of the statements and some of the ideas surrounding the idea of people, you know, being put into the system where they're always going to be in a situation where they have to compete against the able-bodied, either, you know, mentally and physically. Now, turning towards academic ableism in terms of really any ableism towards what can we do about it. I want this to now be, I want to really turn my attention towards the high school students that are in the room. We have a couple of schools here with us today. It has been a journey for me to feel accepted and to feel included. And there are people, clients that I have, people who I try to help get to a better place in life. And they just want to be able to go to school where they don't feel like they're going to prison, where they feel as though they're going to be heard, appreciated, valued. They can learn different ways. They want to feel as though they're going to get the best possible education experience out of that. And I know what that pain is. And I want to say that I feel your pain. I feel the pain, and I feel that not only as a former high school student, but also in the post-secondary world. I feel your pain. So we need to get to a better place where we can have honest conversations. Why is it this way? What are the structures associated with academic ableism? There's a large money component to it. There's a large political component to it. There's a large system that has really hurt us. It's hurt me. And I think about the kids that I help and the kids that, you know, I try to get, you know, a better program for them. And it breaks my heart to see people suffering and how, you know, yeah, we have these things where we'll have a round table or we'll have a group or whatever, but there needs to be a radical change. There needs to be some type of radical movement to try and get what people need. There is no room for moderation in terms of getting what people need. There needs to be a progressive, dynamic, and innovative approach to this. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the other panelists believe about academic ableism and some of the ways to do it, but there needs to be some type of drastic measure. And the one thing I want to say finally is I want all the high school students and really anyone in college to know this and know this. You matter. You matter a lot. Thank you.
Hi, this is Barbara Goldstein. I'm very touched by everything that Aiden just said. And as an educator and as somebody who was a teacher for forever, I think a lot of the burden has to fall on us as educators. I think that the biggest problem is a lack of education. Every single student sitting in a class sits at a different dinner table, and they learn different values and different priorities and different modes of dealing with the world from the family whose dinner table they're sitting at. We as teachers, I think, have to teach. I used to think of it as kindness, but I don't anymore. I think what we have to teach is respect. I think we have to teach respect for every individual and their needs. And what goes hand in hand with that is something that Eric alluded to when he was talking, and that was that the moment before he was paralyzed, he didn't know it was going to happen. And all of us have to think that way, that tomorrow it could be us that's suffering from some kind of disability. How do we want people to behave toward us? What kind of respect do we want people to show us, whether we're physically disabled or we have a mental health problem or whatever it might be? So I think the things that educators need to value and put a priority on in their own classroom, which is our own dinner tables, is that we need to insist that our students behave with respect to all their other classmates. And I believe that that kind of respect can be taught. I don't think that most people don't give it because they're mean-spirited. I think they don't give it because they don't realize that it's needed. And that's a question of education.
Hi, this is Nicole. So this is exactly what I teach, so I'm happy to break it down. Ableism is a system of oppression, just like racism, right, or sexism. And on one hand, it grants certain people privileges. So if you are not disabled, you get privilege under the system because you can do XYZ things. On the other hand, at the bottom of the spectrum, we have people who are disabled, right, who are stigmatized or prejudiced or discriminated because they cannot do XYZ things. And the system is protected by our laws, our economy, our values, our culture, our religions, right? Those things are all tied up in this. And so ableism is really hard to see because we've normalized ableist practices in our culture at large. So we could say one example of ableist classroom policies is time tests. Some people think that time tests prove that you know the content. And if you know the content, you can tell it immediately, right? Other people would say, because I'm up here with a notebook and I've jotted my notes down, I don't really know this topic, right? But my brain doesn't work like everyone else's brains. It works better when I can just think things through first. Now, the system, right, functions to privilege some people, to stigmatize others. And we are constantly upholding those privileges or stigmas, and we don't necessarily know when we are the privileged person, right? That takes us interrogating our own practices and our own selves. And to be honest, we're very rarely given space to interrogate those things, right? We don't teach disability history or disability studies at all in K-12. We only have 23 programs in North America that teach any degree in disability studies at the college level. And so for disabled students, we are very rarely able to learn about ourselves or to think about ourselves as a collective. Because you don't know that you're part of a collective until you connect with others. And if you are constantly told that you shouldn't disclose your disability, that you shouldn't out yourself, then you're not going to find other people. And so when we're thinking about how do we dismantle ableism, on one hand, we need to just expose it for what it is, right? We need to call out ableist policies. We need to call out ableism when we see it. That's how we act as good allies. But we can't do that if we don't know when it happens, right? So first we need to educate ourselves as to what this is. And one of the best ways that you can do this is to just follow disabled people on social media, right? There are so many disabled creatives out there who are constantly talking about their experiences that they have. And these people are being incredibly brave and courageous, right? Isabel mentioned earlier that there's a lot of backlash for doing this work. Being an openly disabled person, on my social media, I regularly get threats to my life. I get a lot of hate mail. I get people telling me to kill myself, right? And this happens every single day. Now, I'm in a position where I have a really good disabled community around me, right? But that took a decade for me to build. It took me forming a disability culture club in my undergrad institution and being the only student to show up for 4 months. In my 2 years, right, between my diagnosis and my graduation, only one other person ever came to those meetings. And this is because people are scared to openly identify as disabled, because our community doesn't allow us to do that safely, right? And if you are at the intersection of multiple systems of oppression, right? If you are a Black disabled person, you cannot disclose as easily as someone with white privilege. That's a reality. And so when we're thinking about how we tackle ableism, it's not just about tackling ableism. Disability justice teaches us that we have to tackle all of these systems at once. Racism, sexism, ableism, LGBTQIA violence, right? We have to be thinking about these systems because they work in tandem with one another. And because ableism has been used to uphold these other systems of oppression for all of human history, right? Women were not granted the right to vote because they were seen as disabled. The system of slavery functioned on the presumption that people of color were disabled. And so when we think about overcoming ableism, tackling ableism in our present day, we have to be radically thinking about how do we combat this when this has been part of our human history for hundreds and hundreds of years. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Millie, and I just want to remind the audience that we're talking about these conversations about disclosure, about ableism, 32 years after the Americans with Disability Act was signed in 1990. The ADA is the only piece of federal civil rights legislation that puts the added burden on the people whom the law is intended to protect to actually enforce it themselves, often through litigation. Disability justice reminds us that access needs aren't shameful. It addresses the shortcomings of the ADA with the simple idea of collective access, which is exactly what Nicole was talking about. That is, access can be provided and met privately through a collective or in a community, and in ways that go beyond able-bodied and neurotypical norms. It's kind of a we're all in this together approach. And I just want to ask one more question myself before we do open it up briefly to the audience in the interest of time. When people talk about disability, there's often a lot of pressure for us to become, quote, independent. But disability justice teaches us that, and many of us I think would agree, and I can certainly attest, that it is our interdependence, again, Nicole, I believe you started to address this, that essentially keeps us alive. And I'd love to hear from, Aiden and Barbara, and then also Nicole. What does your support system look like? What are the challenges and successes of navigating an interdependent life? And then Nicole, specifically, if you could talk a little bit about your disabled academic collective.
Sure. So to begin, it's so important for somebody, with anyone with a disability, to have some type of support system. And I'm very privileged to have an incredible support system in place. And I think about people who don't. I think about people who sometimes are homeless, or people who have disabilities who don't have anyone looking out for them. I have a beautiful family that is here today. I have a wonderful clinical supervisor for my education program that's also here. I have the wonderful people from HRI, organizing this event, and I have these two folks at the panel. I'm very blessed, and the people that support me are people who truly care. They care about education. They care about the same values that I have, and they also want to see me succeed. They've been there through surgeries. They've been there through really some serious health problems. They've been there also to just say, keep going, Aid. You can do it. Because every single day, including today, every single day, I wake up and I say to myself, I cannot do it. I am not good enough. I did it this morning. That's part of the mental health that I have that is being addressed and everything like that. But every single day, and I will probably go to sleep tonight thinking, I still can't do it. But there's a shift in that I find throughout the day that I can do certain things. I can go to work. I can go to school and go to classes and stuff. I can do things. And it's not just I can't. I can do it and I can get by. I try to put myself in a position where I can thrive within it. So whether it be seeking out people, asking for help, really clarifying things, that sort of way. I also, as a student, and I give this tip to the high school students out there, spend hours and hours and hours and hours researching your potential professors, researching to see, what kind of values they have, how they usually conduct their classes. Rate my professor can only get you to a certain point. I will give you that. It can only help you to a certain point. So really trying to figure out exactly in the educational world who can potentially help you. I've been fortunate to speak with good people who are physicians, people who care, but I've also met some people who I originally had in my support system who weren't, I don't think, actually ever were. And it could be hard. It could be navigating. I think that for me, I'm privileged in that I have some independence within me. There are some people who wish they could have more independence, but based on their needs, they don't. But there are days where I really need some help. It is not an easy process. I get sick a lot. It's a long and arduous process at times. So I would really, the final thing I really just want to say about this is that having a support system is so important for somebody with a disability, because having that person to walk alongside you through your journey through life is important, not just for a disability. Anyone who does or doesn't have a disability, it's so important to have somebody special in your life. One person can help the trajectory go forward in your life. So I think it's important that we're kind. I think it's important that we volunteer to, say, I'll be your friend, or I'll be somebody that you can lean on. Because if we have that, and that's a powerful force, if we keep fighting for that, if we keep fighting for a world of love and peace, we are going to help not only people with disabilities make sure that they're successful, but make sure the entire world is successful, because it's a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Aiden.
Hi, this is Barbara Goldstein. I have a slightly different take on this. When I heard the word self-sufficient, the first thing that came to mind was that I was always a fiercely self-sufficient human being. I can do it all. And the older I got and the more my disability impacted my life, I had to be able to admit to myself, I need help. I can't do this all by myself. So when I hear the idea of self-sufficiency, I see it as a burden that I, as the disabled person, carried to admit that I need to ask for help, and that it's okay to ask for help, because I guess part of that whole culture that we were just talking about values, oh, she's independent, she could do it all on her own. And I had to come to realize and accept that no, I couldn't. And there were times that I needed to ask for help. And I'm very blessed that I live in a 55-plus community, And I think there's a certain dynamic to a 55-plus community where everybody says, but for the grace of God, there goes I. So it could be me tomorrow who needs the help. So there's a whole community that's very, very, very willing and able to put out that helping hand. But you're not going to get a helping hand unless you, as a disabled person, are willing to say, I need help. And to me, that was the hardest part. So I know this is a little bit different from the perspective that you were talking about, but I think it has a lot of value too.
Thank you.
This is Nicole. So my community is made up of mainly disabled people. I have a genetic condition. My mother and brother share it with me. And so my household that I grew up in was disabled, even if we didn't have a diagnosis or know it. And then the friend groups that I have made and sustain to this day are generally with other disabled people. I have to say, a lot of my non-disabled friends through high school, college, they're not part of my network anymore because they do not understand, because they do not want to talk about disability, because they did not take precautions during COVID-19. And to be honest, I have no interest anymore in being with communities that are not invested in my liberation, right? As much as I'm invested in theirs. And so the communities that I hold for myself today are either allies who deeply committed to doing that work of understanding my needs, remembering my access needs, ensuring that they were planning, accommodating, accessible get-togethers, thinking innovatively about how to include disabled people, right? Those are the friends that I maintained. But mainly, I have disabled communities that support me. Patient communities have taught me where to get treatment and what to try and where to go next. I have had amazing success talking to other disabled academics, even if we are not openly disclosing to everyone. We have a community in of ourselves. And so I mentioned that my original study group on campus failed. It utterly failed. I was a university student at Colgate University. I tried to put forth a disability justice, disability pride club back in 2014. It did not go well. And then 5-6 years later, as I was wrapping up my PhD, I decided to try again. And I said, what would it mean in a global pandemic to create a community of disabled academics that could be there for each other, that could wrangle with the both huge successes and huge problems of remote access, who could talk about the future of hybridity and utility, of the successes we had during COVID, who were innovatively invested in maintaining any of the access benefits we had seen during the pandemic, and as the pandemic still goes on. And so I created something called the Disabled Academic Collective. We have more than 750 members on a global scale, and I maintain all of our platforms. I do our Twitter, I do our website. We have a private Discord server where we all communicate and we share challenges. And we have people ranging from prospective college students. So you are all, if you see yourselves in the academy in the future, welcome to join. We have undergraduates and graduates and staff and professionals. And we also have public academics, right? Because many, many students are pushed out of the academy. And so the Disabled Academic Collective exists to share resources, share tips about how to navigate university life if you're disabled. And it also is a space for joy, right? Because there are so many joyous things that we achieve, and we have just as much fun as any other people, right? We're whole people with really complex lives. And so it's a space to secure resources, to communicate, and to just be in community with one another. And I'm very, very happy that 2 years into the project, it's going really well. It will eventually, hopefully, become a self-sustaining thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's clear that interdependence and community really helps us to exist in this world in a way that being outside of community does not provide the same access and just ability, like many of you have said or alluded to be ourselves, to disclose, to be able to discuss our needs and get those needs met in a broad range of ways. So again, I have so many more questions, but in the interest of time, I do want to give it out to the audience to maybe just take 1 or 2 questions for our panelists. And I asked the panelists if maybe just one person might want to respond to each thing that's coming from the audience. That would be great. So we do have some folks running with microphones. And I ask that you just mention your name and a brief image description.
First of all, before I introduce myself, I want to say thank you to all of you here for being part of this whole event. And, this is a much needed discussion. And my name is Priscilla Garces, and I have taken on many different leadership roles. I am now part of the Union County Board on Persons with Disabilities. I'm also part of Emerge, which is an organization that trains people to run for office. And I'm part of their founding cabinet committee and the Climate Reality Advocate for climate change and the disability advocate as well. And I have a couple of remarks and one question. And to one of the panelists, and specifically to Aiden, I just want to make a comment and say that I was so inspired by the speech that you gave, and it's very relatable because, I've also experienced different problems when I was in school, being that I am a blind person, and how sometimes you feel alone. But I always knew that having the right support system was good, was wonderful, and that I was able to succeed by just having that strong network. And one of my questions for the panelists here that I want to ask is, what does allyship mean to you, and what resources do you really feel are necessary in order to facilitate an inclusive space for the disability community? Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. This is Millie. Priscilla is also part of the New Jersey Disability Collective with me and other advocates. So it's nice to see you here. And I'm going to go ahead and give this over to our panelists. If any one of you want to address this, again, just so that we can get to one other question.
This is Nicole. So to me, allyship means that people are actively committed to doing the work themselves to learn about disability, right? There is an abundance of resources. There are so many disabled creatives that are constantly creating content about allyship that I would love for people to engage with before they come to me or ask deeply personal questions, right? Allyship means that you've done the work to understand the content and to meaningfully engage with it, and you try to build trust with a person, right? Some questions about disability are incredibly personal, and if you have not built trust with that person yet, it is not your space to ask those things, right? Now, there are tons of resources out there. Alice Wong and Mia Mingus and Sandy Ho put together something called the Access is Love Resource Reading List, and so you can check that hashtag. There's also a website with hundreds and hundreds of documents, and those resources range from, you want to create an accessible event? Great, here are the things you should consider. You want to be a good friend to a disabled person? Here are 10 readings that you should look into. And so I think the Access is Love movement is one of the most powerful we have seen in modern times. I would also say anything from Sins Invalid. We heard a little bit from the disability justice, the 10 principles of disability justice earlier today. Their primer is an excellent resource. It is something that I teach in my classes. It is very, very accessible. And so if you want to start to do the work of understanding disabled people, definitely follow disabled activists. Read things that are written by disabled people. There are so many disabled artists and poets and authors, right? Engage with disability culture meaningfully, and then continue that engagement with how you vote and how you act and how you invest your labor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am sad to report that we are out of time. But I would like to invite you all, if you do have additional questions for our panelists, to please go ahead and email the Human Rights Institute or get in contact with us, and we will do our best to communicate those responses back to you. I would like to invite our panelists to stay. Well, first of all, let us give our panelists a round of applause and thank them for their time. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared and so much of your own experiences that hopefully are going to make us better allies in the community. And again, I invite Felice to do some presentations. And if our panelists, if you will, if you could just, as we call your name, if you could just come up here for our presentation.
Thank you, Millie. Dr. Nicole Schroeder, can I invite you to come up to receive your award? We're joined by Dr. Hank Kaplowitz, the inaugural director of the Human Rights Institute at Kean University.
Sorry, can we get the mic on at the podium?
Dr. Nicole Schroeder, thank you for coming here today and inspiring us with your story. It is Kean University's honor to present you with the Hank Kaplowitz Outstanding Human Rights Educator of the Year Award. Thank you. Next, Barbara Goldstein.
Congratulations. Good for you. Happy for you.
For your work over the years and your time coming here to share with us today, Kean University is honored to present you with this year's Lifetime Achievement in Human Rights Award. Aiden Allman Cooper. Thank you, Aiden, for coming here today and sharing your inspirational words, for the work that you do for so many in activism. It is our pleasure to present to you the Outstanding Human Rights Activist Award. And last but certainly not least, for your incredible work today moderating this important discussion, for your contributions through the year and over the years to the work of the Human Rights Institute, and particularly the Annual Human Rights Conference. Thank you, Millie.
Thank you.
Millie Gonzalez, it is our honor to present to you the Outstanding Community Human Rights Activist Award. Way to go, Team Gonzalez out there. Millie's colleagues came to recognize her. And now is Dr. Farrell going to come close us out? Or Millie? Thank you, Millie.
Thank you. Thank you to my amazing university relations team. I love you all. Our speakers today have redefined disability. They shatter stereotypes and they break barriers through their work and their lives, proving that living and appreciating our full disabled lives is truly a radical act. And I think the overarching message from today's conference can be captured by actually a cartoon inspired by a wheelchair user with a disability who, along with his classmates, is waiting to get into their school following a snowstorm. He asks the person shoveling, "Can you please shovel the ramp?" The maintenance person looks up and replies, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, I'll clear the ramp for you." The student replies, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So as you move throughout the world, please remember to lend your voice, your time, opportunities, and resources to businesses and causes that are disability-led, and use your privilege to purposefully create pathways that everyone can access, because we will all be better for it. I want to thank all of those who made this event possible today, and to all of you for being here. We at the Human Rights Institute at Kean University are confident that each of you, individually and yes, even collectively, will begin to prioritize or continue to prioritize disability justice in your studies, in your professions, and in your everyday lives. Your actions, regardless of type or size, will have impact. Whether that impact happens today or it happens in 20 years, it will have impact. But I know this, together, may it one day be 10 billion remembered, standing in our power. Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here. We want to invite you all to enjoy lunch over at Downs Hall. That is complimentary. And there will be some student volunteers to help you get over there. And we will see you next year.